call the City of Oconomowoc Common Council meeting to order. Has it been appropriately noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
Everyone, please stand, remove your hats and for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does that remove the hat for these guys over here? Okay, got it.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Rozak.
Here.
Alderman Shaw. Here. Alderman Ellis.
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Here.
Alderman Zwart.
Here.
Alderman Stray.
Glad to be here.
Alderman Kavieski.
Here.
Alderman Rogers.
To start the evening, we have 4 public hearings. The first 2 we will do at the same time. The first one is on a zoning ordinance text amendment for general outdoor recreation commercial. And the second one is on the Blue Ribbon Baseball conditional use permit. Our planner will give a presentation. The applicant is then welcome to give a presentation of theirs, and then I will take questions. If you have comments or questions, fill out one of the blue cards that are up here, and I will call your name. So Jason, go ahead and start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Alderman. The first public hearing this evening and the second public hearing are interrelated, so it was decided that I'll introduce both of those at the same time, and then obviously we'll hear comments. The first hearing on the agenda this evening is for an application for zoning ordinance text amendment. The applicant is Diamond Club Entertainment. The request is to change the hours allowed for the outdoor recreation commercial uses in the city. The existing standard that the City of Oconomowoc has is to allow this use from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. in the evening. The amendment is to change those hours from 7 a.m. to 12 o'clock midnight. Now, the Plan Commission reviewed this request for the text amendment on February 12th and recommended the following: 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for non-sports related activities. Non-sports, that could be anything that's a non-athletic event. 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. for any sporting related activity. And the Plan Commission understood that if there was any weather-related delays, it could go past 11 o'clock. The ordinance that the aldermen have in your packets reflect the Plan Commission recommendation. I did an update after the meeting last week, so the ordinance reflects what the Plan Commission is asking for. Now, a little history on that ordinance. The time limits for outdoor recreation was created in 2019, along with all the other conditional use permit standards in the city. Prior to that, there was no time limit for these uses. At that time, in 2019, when I recommended this, I felt 8 to 10 was reasonable, and I presented it as a recommendation. That's where it came from. It came from me. When created, there was no outdoor recreation uses in the city. So this change would not affect any existing outdoor recreation uses. Staff does agree with the Plan Commission's recommendation to limit it to 10 o'clock for non-athletic events and 11 o'clock for athletic events. I will be available to answer any questions at the time that it's on the agenda this evening. Okay, now I will move into the second public hearing, which is the conditional use permit for Blue Ribbon Baseball. It is a conditional use for specifically outdoor recreation use. What is the use? Well, they would like to build a 2,500 seat capacity ballpark. They would like to hold 36 baseball games there day and night. They would like to have some other sports there, such as softball, lacrosse, etc. And then they would like to have other events such as corporate outings, and I took this right off of their event application, movies, political events, charity activities, entertainment, and music acts. The site that the outdoor recreation would be located at is highlighted on the screen. You can see Interstate I-94 and Blue Ribbon Circle North. To give you some ideas, we have the Harley-Davidson, Oconomowoc Harley-Davidson. To the east here, we have a vacant business park. We have some existing business uses over here. We have a business park here with I-94 just to the north of the site. Distribution center down south, and then there is some residential uses a little bit further off the screen. I went out to the site and looked around. There is an existing landscaping on the property to the west that is not on the subject property, but I wanted the council members to see the already existing buffer to the west. To give you a scale of those trees, you can see the light poles there. So there is a fairly dense tree line of evergreens already existing along the west property line. The site is 21.8 acres. The zoning was changed to commercial in December of 2019. Now for outdoor recreation, we have 5 standards, and the use must comply with substantial evidence that it meets those standards in order for the council to adopt. You must determine tonight that it meets these 5 standards. They are hours of operation, and those are to be determined currently on the books. We have 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., and they've stated that they can't meet those, that they would like to change those. Number 2 is a dust control plan. They are going to tell you that there's a turf field tonight, and there's no dust created with the turf field. There's on-site restrooms. Yes, I can show you those. There's must be on-site parking plan. Yes, we have one. I can show you that, 900 stalls. And then they must comply with all other ordinances, and that's like lighting and landscaping, etc. So here's the concept plan that does show the on-site parking. It includes a 45,000 square foot sports training facility. And then the outdoor recreation is a 2,500 seat baseball field with 900 parking stalls. So yes, they do have a parking plan that was presented to the council. Regarding the requirement that they provide on-site restrooms, this is the floor plan, and right there highlighted in red would be the restrooms. I know it's hard to see what that floor plan all is, but I'm showing you that there's a men's and a women's room, so they meet the on-site restroom requirement. Now, as the city planner, I've received a various amount of emails. I know a lot of the common council members were copied on those. I want to bring up that there was 5 main issues raised and concerns noted regarding this outdoor recreation use: hours, noise, traffic, the lights, and environmental impacts. I'd like to just kind of go through those briefly. The hours of operation, there was concerns that having activities go until midnight as the application requested, while the Plan Commission is recommending non-athletic events until 10 p.m. Starting at 7, current hours are starting at 8, and so they're asking for an hour in the beginning. And then athletic events 7 to 11 is what the Plan Commission recommended, with it may go later if there's lightning, wind, heavy rains, etc. Regarding the noise, there was a sound study that was conducted. The consultant's available here this evening for any questions that the council may have. There is existing noise from I-94. The use will need to comply with the city noise ordinances. We do have some on the books. And any event that takes place as the outdoor recreation would be required to use their existing sound system, which is engineered specifically for that facility. Regarding traffic, they did it's called a traffic impact analysis, otherwise known as a TIA. It was conducted for this specific site, done by a professional traffic engineer. The traffic was hence reviewed by the state DOT And there has been meetings held with city staff and the DOT. The DOT is in agreement with the plans as submitted. I wanted the council to know, one of the conditions of approval is a traffic management plan will need to be reviewed and monitored by city staff as well. We want to kind of get a feel of how many vehicles are actually coming in and leaving, and maybe those need to be directed a different way out of there in the evening. So those are conditions in the CUP. Regarding lights, there's two different component of the lights. There's the field lighting for the outdoor recreation, and they're having 8 main poles. These range from 80 to 90 feet high. And they would use downward pointing LED lights. So these are not like the old-fashioned stadium lights that light up the sky. These are very specific down lighting. Members of the Dark Sky Alliance, they would be very cut-off fixtures to just illuminate the field levels. There's a second component of the lighting plan, and that's the parking lot lighting, and that would comply with the city regulations. The lighting plans were submitted in your packets for your review. So the 8 poles for field lighting, I thought it was important that you see these. This is an illustration showing how they would have them. There's 4 in the outfield and then an additional 4 in the side and infield areas. Height of the light poles, again, is between 80 and 90 feet. I put this slide in particular for a scale of how tall the poles are in relative to maybe the building or the stadium use. Regarding the environmental impacts, I've seen various emails stating that. It's going to be a turf field. It's very similar to the Oconomowoc High School field. They're going to be using a tire crumb material. This is to reduce the amount of injuries on the field. There's over 10,000 of these fields in the United States. They grow by between 1,500 and 2,000 additional fields every year. The EPA has done an extensive study, and they could not link turf field to environmental impacts. There's additional information in the staff review about the field, but I won't get into all that. So there's some concept renderings that were included in the packets that you're going to see, but I just wanted to give you a feel for the outdoor recreation component of the field itself. This slide, I thought it was important because one of the Plan Commission's recommendation for the outdoor recreation is when the people are leaving, they thought the plaza area here shown should be contain some type of lighting for security and safety purposes when people are exiting. If it is in the evening hours, there'd be some lighting, and that was a recommendation that I amended your conditional use permit to reflect. So this application, where are we at? The Plan Commission did recommend the approval of the CUP on the 8th of February. I think that's accurate. The public hearing is scheduled for the Common Council. No, I think that was the 12th. The Plan Commission public hearing is scheduled for the 18th. That's tonight. The conditional use permit is on the agenda for this evening. So you'll be taking action on it. The site plan, that all includes the parking, the lighting, the landscaping, the grading, the utilities. Those were all approved by the Plan Commission subject to your action this evening. The buildings still require Architectural Commission review. Tentatively, we're looking at March. They did go before the Architectural Commission, and they had a very good consultation already. I think overall the Architectural Commission was very pleased. They just asked for a couple of tweaks. And then if all of this is successful, then they would apply for building permits. So the staff and the Plan Commission recommendation is to approve the conditional use permit for the outdoor recreation use for Blue Ribbon located on Blue Ribbon Circle North. It would be per the findings in the planning staff report and the testimony heard during the public hearing this evening. I'll be available to answer any questions after the close of the public hearing.
Jason, believe there's one more item that needs to be on your list of things that needs to get done is the stormwater management. Has to go to the Paps Farm Stormwater Management District.
That's true. I overlooked that. That is another approval that they will need by the city, joint stormwater management with the Village of Summit. Correct.
Thank you. Stan, did you want to brief before I turn it over?
So this issue that we have in our community is why the state government should not monkey with local approvals, which they did. Many of you have been here when I've talked about the implementation of Act 67 as it relates to conditional use approvals. What the legislature did 3 years ago was to create a scenario where we are acting as a common council in a quasi-judicial setting. In other words, they are the judges here. And the concern that is raised by that is they are supposed to never prejudge anything, never learn anything about any of this outside of tonight. Well, that's just not realistic, and that just is not right. And they're legislators. They have to work with constituents. You're going to write them because you have an opinion, and they have to look at it because they represent you. So my law firm represents 52 cities, towns, and villages. And, you know, we have to deal with this all over the place. We probably have to put some kind of reason into this whole process. And so because of that, and because I have been a staunch, opponent to public comment before, and many of you, including one former alderman, wrote me and said, how come we can't talk about this when certain aldermen are already having stuff out on public, media? So as city attorney, I have a responsibility to represent the city, right? I have a responsibility to try to bulletproof any determination that is made here tonight in terms of if somebody doesn't like it, they sue the city, and I have to defend the city. So the only thing I'm going to ask each and every one of these alder persons before we open up the public hearing to public comment is whether or not they prejudged this issue, one. Two, whether or not they can be fair and impartial on the basis of the information that is presented here tonight and only here tonight. And so, Mr. Mayor, I would ask you to ask each alder person whether or not they can be fair and impartial, and they have not prejudged this issue.
Go ahead.
Before you ask that one, though, I'm on the Plan Commission.
Right.
I got information there and
Right.
actually did make some comments and stuff at that time, so
Right.
I do have some opinions
Have
because
you,
of that.
have you prejudged whether or not you're in favor of this or not?
Through the Plan Commission, yes, because I had to make a vote there.
Well, actually, you voted to send it on to the Common Council, and if the evidence that's presented here tonight convinces you that this is a good idea, or if the contrary evidence tonight convinces you that it should not be approved, if you can be that fair on the basis of what you hear tonight, regardless of what you heard before,
Okay.
then you're good to go.
We did not hear any information the night of the Plan Commission meeting, per se. We had no public comment on, on the conditional use permit. We had public comment on the zoning, but not on the conditional use. So we really didn't hear any public comment on that specific subject. So I'll go around the room. Alderman Rogers?
Aye.
Can you be objective?
Yes.
Alderman Rozak?
Yes.
Alderman Shaw?
Yes.
Alderman Ellis?
Yes.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Yes.
Alderman Zwart?
Yes.
Alderman Stray?
Yes.
Alderman Kowalski?
Yes.
Giddy up.
Okay, now I'm going to turn this over to the Diamond Club Entertainment Group for a short presentation. You heard I said short?
Thank you. My name is Tim Newbert. I'm here to represent Diamond Club Entertainment. I'm here with my partner Sonny Bando, and I promise to be short in my presentation. I do thank you there very much though for the opportunity. Thank all of the people for here. Again, this just illustrates that we live in a wonderful community and we're passionate about what we're, our quality of life. So just want to go over some things. I thought Jason did a very, a great job, but it's important for us to be able to come before you and be able to say that we do understand the standards that are in place as a function of the city ordinances, and we believe that the development that we are proposing and why we are here tonight, we can adhere to those standards. So again, specifically in regards to the amendment as it pertains to the hours of operation, we are asking for that 1 hour change. Again, not to be redundant, but it is specifically to address those circumstances when we have a baseball game during the summer months and we may run into a rain delay or a lightning delay. It just gives us some additional flexibility to try to get that game in and call it complete. So again, it's only specific to the sporting related activities. It does not pertain, and we're totally understanding of non-sport relating activities where, again, we, without question, can adhere to that 10 o'clock timeframe. The 7 o'clock start is just a function of the indoor training where people like to get up early and kind of get after their particular regiment. So with that being said, when we talk about dust control, again, we are proposing an artificial turf surface, so we don't feel as though that we have any issues in regards to that. To reiterate, we will have on-site restrooms. We do have a large parking lot that will accommodate 900 cars. But I think in essence, we are again here tonight to very specifically talk about some of the other ordinances that you have in place and our desire to try to show you, the council, that we without question have taken these concerns into consideration. And I just kind of want to briefly go over those just to kind of give you an overview. Again, we have consultants that are here. They're here for a specific reason. If we get into the public hearing and there's additional questions, that's their role. Specific to noise, it would be our understanding that there's definitely some questions as it pertains to that. There was a very extensive sound study. You were all presented with that study. It was fairly lengthy. That study was conducted by the Tulaski Group. It started with our development when we were proposing this in the village of Summit, and it has extended now that we have extended, or I chose a different site with this now being in the city of Oconomowoc. But just very, very brief, try to be brief. What we did is we brought the Tulaski Group in. They took ambient sound measurements from 11 different locations around the Summit proposal. They took that data and they worked it within a sound pressure map that we started with originally. This map was a function of using a single center speaker, and we were looking for a worst case scenario. So if we're gonna run this data, we wanna see what the worst case scenario is and what would be the potential impact. This data and the sound pressure map illustrates that we were looking for these projections, again, worst case scenario being at 96 decibels. That's a pretty loud type of an environment. And what we did find when they ran their studies and their analytics, that there was gonna be, without question, some concerns that we needed to address. So very quickly, we went back to the Tulaski Group and we said, okay, what can we do to address these specific situations? Specifically in this scenario, more to the south than to the north, but recognizing that there were considerations that were gonna have to be made. We made two changes. Number one, we openly agreed that we were never going to run the sound system at a 95 decibel level. But more importantly, number two, we reconfigured the sound system so that rather than it being a centered channeled speaker, it was gonna be a speaker system that was going to be placed around the perimeter of the actual facility itself. What we then did is we took the study and we actually incorporated two new locations as a function of this location now being in the city of Oconomowoc. We ran that data against those locations using the same ambient noise, recognizing that we're only moving a half of a mile to the east. I-94 is still very much the primary consideration factor. And when they ran their data, they basically came up with a a classification, and this is a projection that more or less says that it could potentially be anywhere between an occasional audible or a generally inaudible projection. That's what we're projecting as a function of what we're proposing. The reality, though, folks, is that we are here because, and for due reason, or I should say for good reason, there is concern specifically as it pertains to the Harley events that take place 2 times per year. There are a number of individuals that said, hey, we can hear that loud and clear. What we're trying to illustrate here is that that environment is completely different than what we're proposing. This is in an open air type forum. It's a stage. There are no real controls. The box illustrates that it's really kind of replicating a center channel type of a speaker, and it's pushing that sound in a horizontal direction, okay? What we're again talking about doing is very strategically placing our sound system so that the speakers are being pointed downward, okay? And we're bringing those speakers closer to the individual attendees. So we're not, we don't have to play the music as loud. It definitely provides us with a tremendous amount of additional control. And I think that that's the most important word. We are developing a system that provides us with controls. This is not just coming onto a stage and letting it rip and just kind of seeing, you know, whatever happens, happens. What we want to very specifically talk about is that a projection is great, but what does that mean? What we are proposing is that if we had the availability to move forward, we would without question bring the Tulaski Group back and we would pressure test that system, specifically as it pertains to what the sound levels are, what the ambient noise levels look like, and fine-tuning it to make sure that we stay within the City of Oconomowoc ordinance. This system will have a limiter on it so that we have a control in place that will not exceed a specific dBA. So bottom line is we have controls. We without question feel comfortable that we can adhere to the ordinances, and we just wanted to make sure that we did our best to try to differentiate our project versus the Harley-Davidson concerts. In addition, traffic, it's pretty well stated that, again, there was a full traffic study that was done. No infrastructure changes were being requested. This has come up before. When you look at indoor and outdoor, the 2 business plans complement each other very well because the indoor, the busiest times are during the winter months when we're not really using the outdoor, and just vice versa. So there's a nice marriage between those two businesses. In the essence of just, again, trying to make this short, I think this kind of encapsulates the traffic concerns. The DOT was brought in as a function of a citizen's concern. We had a meeting with them. They basically reviewed our data, they reviewed our plan. They did not require us to move forward with any other additional traffic analysis. They feel comfortable with what we're at. Our proposal is going to create a scenario where the traffic should be less than what the other potential uses would be, and they're just asking that, again, when the games are completed, that we monitor that and make the necessary changes if they are needed. Specifically, when we talk about light, again, as Jason indicated, the technology that we're using today, it's different than where we were 20 years ago. It's like other technology, you know, cars that we drive, the computers that we use. This is an LED technology that provides us with, again, a lot of pinpoint precision and specific control. I think this picture represents exactly what we're talking about. This is a facility that's up in Sheboygan. Around the perimeter is residential neighborhoods. This does a very good job of illustrating that the light spread is not there. This is a facility right here in Waukesha. Again, if you look out in the outfield, and this is just basically a map that shows you that when you look at the perimeter, a photometrics map, you can again see that the light shed is basically down to 0. When we talk about turf toxicity, without question, we can all appreciate that there are concerns. Again, the EPA, though, has not found anything that we've been able to uncover that suggests that there's a significant environmental concern. I think, again, it's important to look in your backyard, recognizing that this is the same turf that the City of Oconomowoc High School is using. And for what it's worth, the Arrowhead football field is now on their 2nd artificial turf playing surface. And the logistics between them and Beaver Lake is somewhat comparable to what we're looking at here between this location and potentially Silver Lake. Again, we're talking about a filtration system that is kind of built in as the turf is being laid on a very solid substrate that includes different types of stone and aggregate. So it has a filtration system built within it. At the end of the day, I will just summarize this by saying, again, we absolutely believe that we can adhere to these standards, and I'll just leave you with this. We're extremely excited about this opportunity. We truly believe that it's unique. We find that it would be a tremendous asset to the city. It provides so many wonderful opportunities beyond just athletics. There's just a great forum to do a lot of really, really neat things that, quite frankly, we believe our world could use a little bit more of, specifically as it pertains to embracing community, recognizing individuals that should be recognized on an everyday basis. We are truly excited. The people that are here that are in favor of our project, we say thank you. The people that are here that have concerns, we truly understand. We are here to win their support. We need their support. This is what this project is about. We ask you to take a look at the information. Again, we have consultants here that can ask additional questions, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. What I'm gonna do now is call, we have blue cards and I have a lot of them here. So I'm gonna call your name and you come up for a comment.
Are they done?
Yeah. We're gonna limit the comments to 3 minutes or less. And don't repeat what someone else has said. So the people that are first on the list, I just shuffle these things up, so I'm really not sure which order they're in. But again, like I said, please don't repeat what someone else has already said.
Mr. Mayor, as a point of order, are we having people speak on both items at the same time, or are they speaking separately?
On both items. First person is Jim Snyder. Please state your name and address, too.
Okay, my name is Jim Schneider. I'm the owner of Lake Country Manufacturing. We're located in 950 Blue Ribbon Drive in the industrial, Paps Farm Industrial Park. I purchased the lot in 1981, and prior to purchasing it, they told us that the covenants for building in this industrial park was very stringent. And for example, they said that they told us the size of the building, where it had to be located, the color of the building. They told us how many ponds that we had, holding ponds, the size of them, the depth, and what had to be in them. They told us how many parking spots we had to have. They said absolutely no parking on the employees on the road. And I guess my question tonight is, are these same covenants going to be for the stadium? And if not, why? And if you're going to have different covenants for the stadium, does that also now going to apply for the industrial park? Thank you.
Thank you. Stan, do you want to answer that?
Well, so there's no confusion. Private restrictive covenants really don't involve the city. If you had concerns with regard to the developer, you would have to talk to them about how private covenants would be dealt with. They're not law, they're not ordinance, they're not, anything to do with the city. They're private covenants. So the only thing that we're dealing with here tonight is a revision of the ordinance and the potential issue of a conditional use permit that would allow this particular use.
Come up to the mic.
If the whoever's running the park, if you will, the private entity, has the authority to change covenants, it's nothing that we can deal with. Although, I must say, there's an item later on the agenda that the way that this was put together, that the city would have to agree to any changes of the covenant. But my recommendation to the common council would be that if the powers that be that are private want us to do that, I think it would be ill-advised not to agree.
Okay. Lisa Riegel? Normally, these are just going to be statements that you read. We're not going to have interaction.
My name is Lisa Riegel. I live at 378 32 Atkins Knoll Road in the Village of Summit. Although I do not live in Oconomowoc, I'm a little over a mile away from the proposed sports complex. I am against the sports complex completely due to the noise levels, traffic congestion, increased possibility of drunk driving, light pollution, reduced property values, and putting the quality of Silver Lake in danger with artificial turf that could cause cancer, and changing the building provisions of what is allowed for the industrial park. If the sports complex does get passed, extending the hours to 12 midnight would be a mistake because baseball games in general do not last until midnight. It would be for concerts. Even though it's summer, I still work. Please be respectful of those that work and need to wake up early. Please do not extend the hours of operation past 10. And once again, do not let the sports complex be built in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Trout?
My name is Matt Trout. I live at 815 Pine Meadow Court in Oconomowoc in the Village of Summit. The last 15 years of my life, I've commuted Delafield Road, 5 years living in the city of Oconomowoc, and the last 10 years living in the Village of Summit. I fully support the building of the facility, and I couldn't be more excited.
Thank you. Faye Sanders?
I had to write down my statement. I listened to Jason, and I still have concerns. I still have concerns about noise pollution, especially with this facility across the road from a hospital. No mention was made of crowd noise. Anytime you have a game, people are screaming bloody murder these days, so that's a problem. Light pollution, I think, is still an issue, and traffic congestion because of the emergency vehicles that will need to go to the hospital, because also a lot of people use that road to go south or north. The congestion would just aggravate it. Lot placement. I kind of went out there and scoped it out, and there are corporate buildings. And it's my understanding, if I'm correct, that's a marshland, which is nature's flood control. And if you place such a large structure on that marshland, you've got problems with anything else that's built around it. That's a civilian assessment, but it's a concern. Security. I listened several months ago to the man from ACE. He has security problems because of the Harley rallies. And there doesn't seem to be anyone assuming responsibility for those security problems. And the more people you have, the more security problem you're going to have. It's a reality. So would our police chief be in charge of all of that? Do we even have enough police to take care of something like that? Would there be an ordinance indicating that the owner would have to take on that obligation? And last but not least, and I hope I'm not talking into the wind, our community touts excellent quality of life. We advertise that concept. I am sure that there are many who have moved to our community from all points on the map, specifically for that prized quality of life. They have not moved here for continuous construction of buildings. They desire space, green grass, forest, wetlands, and concomitant wild creatures drawn here by adequate habitat. They want breathing room. One gentleman some months back spoke to his belief that all we have out there is a lump of grass. That's one perspective. The assumption was if it's not built on, it has no value. I have a different perspective, that we must have a credible balance regarding building versus nature if we are to maintain our quality of life here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Todd Peterson?
Todd Peterson, Oconomowoc on Black Hawk Drive, and Milwaukee on North 59th Street. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for the willingness to hear this matter. My family has lived in Oconomowoc since 1946. Oconomowoc has been a significant part of my life since 1964. I learned to ride a bike here. I caught my first fish here. And my dad hit fly balls to me until his hands would bleed. I have seen firsthand the positive changes for this community over the years. Its growth and development has been thoughtful and spot on in my book. And for that, the thanks go to you. I truly love Oconomowoc and would never do anything to hurt it or harm it. A bit of history here. I, along with many coaches and administrators in the room, have worked tirelessly behind the scenes advocating for opportunities for our kids and a better brand of baseball in Wisconsin for all to enjoy. In my case, I began coaching in 1984. There has been much organizing, games, pitching lessons, practices, and late night hours that were spent at the ballpark for the kids. That is why we do this. It is our desire to see them thrive in the great game of baseball. Baseball builds character and commitment to excellence. Very few first-class venues, great training opportunities, and great fields exist now. But we know that they are paramount to the success of the players. An interesting fact. About 15 years ago, there was a meeting at the high school of over 200 Oconomowoc residents along with the Pabst Farm Commission, a group that was created to help the corridor become more vibrant. The commission wanted to make Pabst Farm a signature location, a destination that would attract people from all around. They succeeded in bringing people together on that day, but they could only come up with a suggestion of water fountains and walkways. They were unable to put their fingers on the catalyst that would bring the community together. The group most assuredly wanted more. It is my belief that what they were seeking 15 years ago is before you this evening. We have been sensitive to the concerns of the residents, and I believe you will find that those uncertainties have been researched and addressed. But I must tell you, I hear a much different side. There is an excitement like no other from nearly 900 residents that have signed the petition in favor of this project. 900. A good many of those signatures came from Oconomowoc and nearby Summit as well. The excitement has carried over to other communities, including Dousman, Ixonia, Heartland, Delafield, Waukesha, Sullivan, Ottawa, and others. Residents that I have spoken with personally have shown their excitement about this project because they know it will bring more to the community than just baseball. Earlier in my speech, I think I said it, I used the word excellence. I want to leave you with two thoughts tonight. Excellence is the constant pursuit of excellence. And more specifically, as it relates to this great project, the benefits are potentially endless. Really and truly endless. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everybody to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Jeff Lee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and common council members. So there's going to be others that will
Please
talk.
state your
I'm
address,
sorry,
please.
Jeff Lee. I live at 37420 Indian Mountain Road, Conomowoc. There'll be some others that'll talk about turf issues. But I'm going to talk specifically about a potential chemical called PFAS. And PFAS, which is per polyfluoroalcohol substance, are called forever chemicals because they do not break down in the environment and bioaccumulate in our food chain. So I'm the vice president of sales for a company called Total Water Treatment Systems, and have provided purified water solutions for contaminated wells, specifically with PFAS. So we specialize in the installation and service of purified water systems throughout the Midwest. We also own 3 water treatment companies in the Michigan area and have sold hundreds of water treatment systems due to the PFAS contamination in residential and commercial applications. Interestingly, in Michigan, offenders or polluters are paying for the cost of these water systems, which total in cost between $6,000 and $8,000 each to install, and depending on the level of PFAS. So some of the questions I have tonight, and I know that Mr. Gallo commented that there's not inclusive studies yet proving that turf has contamination issues or stormwater issues. I do have some articles that I'll submit tonight that would challenge that. My question is, will Diamond Entertainment be held responsible for water systems that are contaminated, or wells that are contaminated originating from artificial turf, if it is proven to be so in the future? If not DCE, who will pay? The city of Oconomowoc? Or will the taxpayers or residents be left to handle that cost? I live approximately a half a mile from the proposed stadium, and I also have a Sandpoint well, which, for those of you who don't know, means my well is about 50 feet from the surface. I tell people all the time, don't go to the bathroom in the lake, that's my drinking water. Certainly, as a homeowner with a well, I'm highly concerned about the potential of groundwater contamination from the proposed turf field. All our neighbors also have wells and that stand to be compromised by turf fields, if the turf field is installed. The area where the stadium is proposed abuts a watershed area that is also a highly protected area. This area ultimately flows into Battle Creek, which is located in the Oconomowoc Watershed Protection Program, or OWPP, and is considered an impaired stream. Through the efforts of the Oconomowoc Area Watershed Program, the intent has been to repair this watershed and not impair it further. Allowing a turf field will further pollute this valuable watershed. Many say PFAS is in everything: my coat, my clothes, even the carpet on the floor. They might be right. It's in a lot of household items. But now that we know that there's an issue and learning more about the risks, does it make sense to install a turf field where it can potentially contaminate drinking water and a critical watershed? Has a study been done to ensure that the turf will not contaminate our drinking water or this critical watershed? We are counting on you to do the right thing and not let turf be installed here. Thank you.
Thank you. Luke Nelson.
Good evening. My name is Luke Nelson. I live at W1233 Steinway Drive in Oconomowoc. I've lived in Oconomowoc for my entire life. I grew up playing baseball in Ashippun. I went to Oconomowoc High School. I went to Southern Illinois University, played baseball, and got drafted there as well. I now am the president of the Oconomowoc 5-O's baseball organization, have been for the last 10 years, where I've seen numerous kids from ages in 4K all the way up through 8th grade go through our program. We've used our Oconomowoc High School. We've used another facility in the area. A lot of people travel to Styx and Waukesha, and I am in 100% support of this facility. We currently have about 15 teams, on average about 11 kids per team, so about 165 kids that have committed to working out and practicing and continuing their career at this facility. We're excited to be able to go to a game on a night in the summer and watch some baseball in the community. I have 2 sons that are in the audience that I hope have the ability to be able to play in a facility like this. I never got to play in a facility like this. So I hope that this passes tonight and all the kids in our organization and surrounding communities get the chance to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane?
My name's Diane, I'm from Oconomowoc. I'm not going to ask us questions because I know I don't get any answers. As far as the times go, I think they should stay at the 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, even though they said 30% would be only on the weekends. We have the hospital there, and we have traffic at 7 to 8 o'clock, and I think between ambulances and the hospital there, it would be better to keep the morning hours at 8, except for the athletic facility. If you're going to have an athletic facility and you're going to use that where the people are going to go in and train, that's very different than opening up the entire stadium. So if the facility for where the athletes want to train has to be open at 7, that might be a different story than opening the entire facility and having all the traffic show up at 7 o'clock in the morning. The lights in the example they gave there, that example was looking out. It was from the stadium looking out, and yes, you would see all darkness. If you were a house and you were looking out, or if you were the hospital and you were looking in, you're going to see the lights. So I thought that that was not quite as accurate as it could have been. There have been numerous ballpark failures. There are articles all over the newspapers, if you Google it, about all the baseball failures of facilities like this that have been built over the last 10 years. Baseball in general supposedly is on the decline of 5.7% since 2016. I'm not saying that the kids shouldn't have a stadium. Women's professional soccer brought up the issue about the turf about 3 years ago because they noticed an sincere increase in the rate of cancer, especially in the female athletes who had been playing on this type of turf. I'm curious about what else comes under the auspices of athletics. So if they wanted to suddenly be able to have road rallies here on the field, they wanted to have stock car races, they wanted to have little kids racing around on motorcycles causing noise, is that considered an athletic event that would have to adhere to a certain time, whether it's at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight? You know, what exactly, I think we need to know what exactly an athletic event is. It's not necessarily only baseball. If they're going to build a pool, is it going to be swimming? The problem I also have is, you know, we're going to take away some of the business that a lot of the athletic clubs have in town. We did that with Fleet Farm. You know, it won't be long before one of our numerous hardware stores may not be here anymore, or Stein's may not be here, or the pet store might not be here, because Fleet Farm, while it's a great facility, you know, has definitely caused a hit on some of these businesses. What's going to prevent from this indoor facility that people are going to go train in from doing the exact same thing to all the numerous athletic clubs that are in town, and we have plenty of them? You know, not any different perhaps than when Planet Fitness opened. Did it hurt other clubs? I'm sure it did. It's a lot bigger, it has more modern technology, it's a lot less expensive. So I think we need to make sure that we're not putting out of business some of the existing businesses that are already here and that have been here for years. You know, more for Oconomowoc isn't always better. We have a great town. I come here a lot because I care about what happens to the town. And there will be a downturn in the economy again. It's inevitable. And those of us who are of a certain age have certainly seen this happen more than once. So what happens when that happens again? You know, we went with 28 vacant businesses in town on Main Street when the street was torn up and the recession came in, and it looked like a ghost town downtown. You know, we already don't have any parking in town. I'm not sure that 900 spaces is enough spaces. That's neither here nor there, perhaps, but it seems like, I guess I would personally like to know better, what part of this is the city going to be responsible for? I think the groundwater supply is a big issue. I think whether or not this turf causes cancer, we can go back and you can research what the female professional soccer players thought about this and the research that they've been doing in it. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Rosh?
Good evening. My name is Kevin Rosh. I live at 1243 Victoria Lane in Oconomowoc. I'm a lifelong resident of the city. I own a business in the city as well. I'm in full support of this proposal. I think it would be a tremendous asset to the community. I talk to many neighbors and friends, and what attracts them to the city of Oconomowoc is all of the resources we have. And I can tell you with youth sports, it's a growing community. We have many families and kids. I'm a coach in the 5Os organization. I have been for 3 years now. And just in the 3 years that I've been involved with that, the amount of kids involved in coming out for tryouts is tremendous. We cannot, unfortunately, keep all these kids in the program. So having a facility like this is going to allow more opportunities for more kids, for more families to learn the game of baseball and many other sports. Growing up in Oconomowoc, I was a big baseball player. Always looked up to all the other baseball players that played here in Oconomowoc. Tremendously rich community in baseball talent. And having a facility like this with a stadium attached would be just an unbelievable opportunity. And I think Oconomowoc needs to look at not just places to live and to work, but also to play. And I encourage you all to vote for this proposal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Nate Rice?
Good evening. My name's Nate Rice. I live at 37803 Valley Road. I did have a stick drive. I'd like to just show a couple pictures quick because I want to make a point about the groundwater issue, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Do I just put it in the machine? I don't know if someone can jump up here and I can keep talking while that happens, maybe.
Go ahead, keep talking, he'll take care of it.
It's hard to follow Kevin Rosh, who's a great guy. He came over to my house, gave me a quote on floors, haven't had him put in yet. But this is tough because it divides the community. Sean Smith, all these 5-0 guys are awesome guys. I used to sit in the Summit Parks and Rec Committee, and we put in all the baseball fields down there at the community park in Summit. The only thing we didn't want, the only thing we didn't want was lights. The people in Genesee Lake Farm said no lights. We said, you know what, that's reasonable. I wouldn't want a ball diamond in my backyard with lights either. So 5-0s are cool. They're like, yeah, we can do this without lights. Now we have someone coming in outside the community and saying, we need lights. I played baseball in high school. I coached high school ball. I played in college. I wasn't as good as some of these 5-0 guys. But it was fun, and I loved the game. So it's hard to stand up here as somebody that played the game and loves the game and be against this project. But I'm not against baseball. I'm just against a stadium that I think is going to destabilize the community, especially in the area where I live. I live on the North Shore of Silver Lake. There's other people that are going to talk about this, but the sound during these concerts, and I know they're going to try to say, well, you know what, it's not the Harley, it's not going to be like that. Well, we don't know. And I appreciate Mr. Newberg saying that it's a projection. Nobody really knows. They set up one speaker in the middle of the stadium. And I'm not sure, I have a question about that, and I get it that maybe no one's going to respond to my questions, but have there been specifications drawn up for the stadium? I'm not sure. But I do have information, and I know I can't talk about this all night, so I'm gonna try to move this right along. But I've got some information here from Steve Hamilton, and he works, he's been in the music business in Milwaukee since 1975. He works at Macon Sausage Records. He's a whole list of people he's mixed for. Stan, I imagine, maybe knows about this guy. But the question I ask, and I ask a bunch of questions, and I think all of you need to review the answers to those questions, because I'm not so sure that you can just come and walk into this venue, plug in, and have a great show. So I said, if a band comes into this, I used Altered 5 Blues Band. I work at a high school. I'm a school counselor. I love kids. I work hard every day to keep them safe and dream big dreams. So I asked the question, so if the principal's band, Altered 5 Blues Band, comes in, or some other act like this at this venue, would it be feasible to provide concert quality sound through a minor league stadium's acoustical system? And I know it's not minor league, it's a college level league. The short answer is no. The kind of PA systems usually installed at ballparks and stadiums are meant to communicate with the fans in the stands about who is at bat, what the score is, background music, announcements, etc. These kinds of systems are not going to work for a professional live music concert experience. These types of distributed sound systems are not designed for high fidelity or sound source localization, meaning the PA is not meant to focus the listener on the actual location of the announcer, and the frequency response of the system is designed for speech, not music, much like a telephone. So anyways, he gives 3 referrals for people you could follow up with to verify that this is the case. And then it says, back to the one speaker idea, we're not gonna allow them to bring in any of their own equipment. For a successful live music experience, a full fidelity sound system designed for music reproduction is required. Sound reinforcement for musical performance needs to come from the stage to localize the source of the music for the listener. The arrangement of the PA on the stage allows the person responsible for the overall sound, the mixer, to add to and reinforce the sound coming from the stage and to reinforce that sound with the localized PA. Anyways, it goes on to say, I think pretty convincingly, that what's being proposed may not work. He also referred us to Clearwing, which is a huge company out of Milwaukee. They're based here. They have they do Super Bowl shows. They do Trump rallies. I got a couple pictures I was going to show, but maybe I won't do that because I want to talk about groundwater and the sound coming across the lake. So last summer, Harley concerts, they're saying it's not going to be like that. They're going to control the sound. I walk outside, calm night, the sound cascades across the lake. You can hear the sound of the music. It's kind of like you got it down on a 1 or 2 setting on your stereo. But you can hear it as crisp as you can hear me talk right now. It's unbelievable. And until you hear it, you don't know. So you go inside, you close your windows, on and on and on. So anytime after 10 o'clock, absolutely not for anything like that. So I appreciate the Plan Commission putting some reasonable restrictions on that. But I think it's going to create a nuisance, and there's going to be some bad impacts on life on the lake. The lights, like somebody already said, you're going to look at the lights. They're coming down, but you're going to see those lights. There's a wall of light. You can't get around that. They talk about Dark Sky Alliance that Mr. Gallo spoke of. There is an International Dark Sky Association. I'm a member of that, and apparently the person that did the light study is also, that's awesome. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't have an impact, doesn't mean that it was endorsed by this organization. So to get to let me just show you real quick the pictures here, then you guys can review this maybe later, hopefully. And I'm not good at technology. This is obviously not the Harley that we know in Oconomowoc that's down at Summerfest. Big stage, big speakers. This is Trump rally. So they can stack these speakers up, and obviously it's not going to look like that, but it just shows the extreme. So the people that did this was the people downtown at Clearwing. So this is one of the first, I think this is the inaugural Harley Fest. You see speakers on the side. You might think, oh, those aren't that loud. But I talked to a guy at Clearwing, and he said, oh, no, they might be small, but trust me, we can piss off the neighbors with the sound we bring, even with our smallest systems. You see the subs across the bottom? There's 4 of them there. But this is Evolved. That's the inaugural concert. Look at what they got now. So I'm not saying that they're going to put that out in center field and have concerts, but if they do, they're not going to be playing it through the sound system they got there, is what this expert says. As far as the groundwater issue, I've got a lot of documents. I'm just going to tell you what they are. I'm not going to.
Yeah, please wrap up, but we have a lot more to go through here.
Okay, and I also got, I appreciate that, thank you. My wife couldn't be here tonight. She wrote a letter that she was unable to submit yet. The planner talked about what about the sound issue? What happens whenever, there's going to be someone from the Plan Commission, I forget who it was, asked a question. And the answer was, well, we'll see what happens. So my wife partnered with someone that lives close by, and we got the police reports from Franklin. So we kind of know what's going to happen. There are 46 sound complaints in the first 3 years down there since the ball field went in. All the police reports are here. You can look at those, and there's a letter talking about how somebody's quote said the person reported that he's being tortured in his own home. Somebody came out of a bathroom throwing feces. Which my wife thought people would laugh, but it's kind of disgusting, and do you really want that in Oconomowoc? Granted, it can happen anywhere, I suppose. But anyways, ATMs, there's just a whole raft of bad stuff that goes along with something like this, unfortunately. The groundwater thing, it's real. Someone's going to talk about that. Doug Chirkauer is a hydrogeologist at UW Milwaukee. He's an emeritus now. He's recognized all over the place as being very knowledgeable. He referred me to some documents that I'm just going to submit to the record. This talks about the regional water supply in southeast Wisconsin. Stan Riffle knows this because he was at Summit whenever they went through the incorporation process. He talked about how important it was to protect the water. The only way Summit can do it is if we become a village. Stan was right on. So here is this map that shows that in this area, there's a shale layer called the Maquoketa Shale. It's not pervious, so the water hits it and it doesn't go down any farther. Out here into Summit, it's all sand and gravel. So that water percolates down in, recharges.
Please wrap up.
That's fine. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity. I trust that everybody here tonight will be reviewing this information. It's all very clear. We have a letter from University of California, Berkeley, geophysicist. This is really important stuff. And this talks about how the water is going to get from that site into the lake, the wetlands, and underground passageways that pushes that water. And then I got something talking about the soil types from a professional engineer. We got excessive rain events, 200-year events in the past, 200-year events in 2008 that resulted together in a 500-year event. Here's your storm cleanup, Oconomowoc. Anyone that lived here knows how bad that was. And this talks about how the soils in southeastern Wisconsin, in the village of Summit and Oconomowoc, are highly likely to be contaminated by, there's a direct path to the groundwater through these soils and at this site. And this shows that the project is in the Silver Lake watershed. So that's of concern, like Jeff Lee said, about wells, but not just wells, surface water, the lakes, and who pays for that if there's problems and pollution that can be traced to the ballpark. If they put in grass, that concern goes away. And then you go outside, instead of smelling nasty, hot tires in the summer, you're gonna smell blades of grass, which is what makes me wanna go to a baseball game, not watching it on artificial turf. So there's more I could say. Can I just, 20 seconds?
No, I have a whole bunch of
Very
things
good.
here.
I'm sorry.
Let's
It would
wrap
be
up.
nice if we could share the information. This is the first opportunity at a public hearing for us to do that. So I trust that you'll review the slides here. I'll leave and it shows the pathway that relates to the UC Berkeley professor. So thanks for your patience and your indulgence.
Doug Orman.
Doug Orman, 2317 North Daystar Lane in Summit. First, I just wanted, since we were looking at a conditional use here, just to read from the zoning ordinance. A proposed conditional use shall be denied unless the applicant can demonstrate that the proposed conditional use will not create undesirable impacts on nearby properties, the environment, or the community as a whole. I believe the CUP application is incomplete because it does not detail the plan of operation for uses other than baseball activities. The application is very specific about how many baseball games will be held. It does not state how many concerts, festivals, or other uses are planned or when they will be held. A conditional use permit should limit uses. This application is asking to conduct, quote, any non-sports related uses. It is completely open-ended and non-binding in regard to use. This raises the question whether the business plan is viable if the outdoor use is limited to baseball. Other Northwoods League franchise operators cite 3 factors as critical to financial success: favorable lease terms, sponsorship income that covers 2/3 of the operating expenses, and not having to pay the athletes. DCE would appear to have much higher costs than the typical franchise. There are 22 franchises in the league, and 3/4 of them play in stadiums owned by the municipalities and operated by the Parks and Rec departments. One team pays only $450 per weekday game and $350 per game on the weekends. At the Plan Commission hearing last week, it was stated that this project is a $20 million investment. Clearly, their cost to use a stadium is going to be significant. Sponsorship income is an open question since we have no idea what they have lined up. The biggest factor in the league's favor has been not having to pay the athletes. That is what differentiated the NWL from the indie leagues that were struggling to stay in business. Last September, the state of California ruled that starting in 2023, college athletes can strike endorsements, deals, and hire agents. Within 2 months, 16 states had introduced or made plans to introduce similar legislation. The upper Midwest states where the NWL is located including Wisconsin, are among those 16 states. Under pay for play, athletes can be paid for the use of their name, image, or likeness. Go to any NWL website and you will see roster pages showing the athletes' names and images. If the league has to start paying the athletes, that will have a material impact on the business model. The original application from DCE was titled Blue Ribbon Baseball. Now, in the space of a month, they feel the need to go way beyond that. What changed? Did they take a hard look at the business plan and realize they needed those other activities in order to be profitable? Further, the CUP application does not demonstrate that those other activities will not have an adverse impact as required under 17.8066A3 in the ordinance. For example, the application wording specifically speaks to the impact of arriving and departing traffic from baseball games. There's no discussion of concert-related traffic or the traffic impact of any other uses. The lighting plan does not include any mention of lighting that will be used for concerts or other activities. It is common for concert lighting to include spotlights and light shows. Without knowing what lighting will be used for those events, it is impossible to gauge the impact. The security plan specifies there will be no tailgating policy and there'll be traffic control at the end of the games. There's no plan presented for concerts or any other uses. The application also leaves open the sound systems that could be used for concerts and other activities. It states that if the activity requires sound speakers, they will be connected to the existing acoustical system. It does not limit the sound system to the existing system. There's no wording that would prevent them from also having a separate system as long as they connect it to the existing system. It's my feeling that the CUP process has moved too quickly and it does not meet the conditional use requirements of the ordinance. I would ask the council not to approve this permit. During the map amendment process, the Plan Commission and City Council recommended and approved the rezoning based on the baseball stadium project. That's a matter of public record since DCE presented the proposal at the Plan Commission hearing, and the presentation was included in written form to the City Council in the agenda packet. Simultaneously, the public was directed not to speak to the proposed stadium use at both the Plan Commission and City Council public hearings for the map amendment. By doing so, the city denied the public the ability to provide testimony relevant to the project, while both the commission and council members were able to base their decisions on the project proposed from DCE. After receiving direction from the city attorney not to mention the project in the map amendment deliberations, the council members made no mention of it. This is in stark contrast to the earlier Plan Commission hearing during which the project was presented, discussed openly by the Plan Commission, and cited by all of the Plan Commission members in support of their vote to recommend the rezoning. To reiterate, members of the public who were present were told not to comment on the DCE proposal at this hearing. Since the agenda packet for the map amendment request included the baseball stadium presentation, it is evident that the council intentionally obfuscated the public record by barring any mention of the project during the public hearing, thereby giving the appearance that the rezoning action was taken without regard to the stadium project.
Mayor?
Lastly, I just have a couple of
Wrap up.
questions that I know you don't answer. I want on the record is that the indoor facility is described as the primary use. Is the ballpark considered an accessory use? Who initiated the process for the map amendment in the CUP? Thank you.
I don't want to have to do this, but I'll put people on a clock if we keep going over. John Hogan?
Good evening, and thank you for your time. I'm not going to, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but I'm just going to say, baseball has been a big part of Oconomowoc, as Oconomowoc has changed quite a bit since I was a kid here. Baseball should still be a part of it. That's it.
Thank you. One of Luke Nelson's daughters, I think. Kaysen. Wasn't sure if that was an S or what.
Hi, my name is Case Nelson, and I support this baseball facility, and I'm very excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Eubanks?
Good evening. My name is Sherry Eubanks, and I'm the Vice President of Operations at Ace Precision Machining. My family owns and operates Ace Precision, as well as the entity Blue Ribbon LLC that owns the facilities and the property in the business park at Paps Farms. Our property is adjacent to the proposed location for the stadium and training facility, and as a result, we are directly impacted by your decisions here tonight. Over the past couple of weeks, we have entered a series of letters into the record to express our significant concerns for the stadium proposal and to help provide more information about Northwoods League teams and the stadiums and municipalities who host them. It was our hope that this information would help you with your due diligence, prompt you to ask Diamond Club and Paps Farms some tough questions, and to press them for straight answers. So why so many letters? Well, I will tell you that over the past several months, it has been incredibly frustrating and disappointing to be an existing business owner in the Paps Farms Business Park. The fact that Paps Farms is even proposing this development makes it clear that they have no intention of following, much less enforcing, our business park restrictive covenants for future developments. Paps Farms is putting their name on a development that by definition constitutes a nuisance and is not permitted in our business park, an outright betrayal of the promises made to existing business owners. The city's actions thus far have been supportive of Paps Farms' behavior, opening the door to non-business park uses instead of pushing back to hold Paps Farms accountable to preserving the character, business environment, and land values in the business park. Now the city planner is recommending that you approve modifications and variances to the restrictive covenants to permit what they acknowledge would have been a nuisance under the existing restrictive covenants. Even worse, none of the exceptions will apply to the existing businesses on the same circle, only for Diamond Club Entertainment. Help us understand why we should not be outraged by the blatant disregard for our businesses. What high-tech company is going to build in this business park if you make these changes? We certainly wouldn't have. Furthermore, it's been our impression that little effort was being made by city staff to understand the caliber of the businesses that call the business park home. Nor was there much attempt to identify or appreciate the adverse impacts that we would reasonably experience as a result of this development. For instance, we operate high-tech manufacturing companies in state-of-the-art facilities that are clean, well-lit, and create little to no noise. Yet we heard stereotypes at committee meetings about manufacturing companies being dirty, loud, poorly maintained, and of limited value. We are internationally recognized suppliers in our industries, bringing customers and visitors to our facilities from all over the world. We are award-winning Wisconsin top workplaces, offering wages, benefits, and work environments that our employees for our employees that set the standard in Wisconsin and beyond. We have built relationships with area nonprofits and local schools. In fact, we are businesses that have been dedicated to being strong corporate citizens for decades. Yet planning staff reports diminish our value and stated that the typical uses in the business park do not create community partnerships, nor do they bring people to the city. Beyond that, we are businesses that have paid top dollar to build and operate in a location that was touted to be high-end, high-tech, and a master-planned business park. We have followed the restrictive covenants of our business park to preserve the caliber of our community and protect our property values. We have paid millions in property taxes, yet planning staff reports can't seem to identify a single adverse impact for building an outdoor venue that markets cheap entertainment for thousands of people right next door. The planning staff report states that the proposed use will not cause adverse impacts to the current or future adjacent uses, even though the noise and traffic studies paid for by Diamond Club can identify them, and the proposed modifications to the restrictive covenants acknowledge that the use would be a nuisance under current agreements. On its face, it appears that more time discussion, and critique has been given to the proposed car wash in Oconomowoc than the outdoor stadium that will seat thousands in our quiet business park. Multiple meetings to improve the beauty of the car wash, but virtually a green light for a stadium of concrete, artificial turf, and 90-foot light poles at first blush. It's hard not to be angry, as you can tell. After reading the planning staff reports and being told that we could not talk about the stadium at public hearings or welcome city staff into our facilities, it was clear to us that this development was a done deal, was either a done deal in the eyes of the city of Oconomowoc, or very little homework was being done to understand what is truly being proposed. Either way, we decided we needed to do our best to research similar developments, identify gaps in the studies provided by Diamond Club, and share what we learned with the Common Council.
Please wrap up. I've already given you double the time, so.
I'll be quick. I think this would be another example of making sure that adjacent landowners could be heard. I reached out to every municipality that currently hosts, I reached out to every municipality that currently hosts a Northwoods League team, every municipality. I was freely provided feedback, sample annual action plans, use agreements, facility plans, and invitations to tour stadiums across the Midwest. I had conversations with parks directors, planning directors, aldermen, and more. All were willing to freely talk about the impacts of these sorts of developments and uses. What were some takeaways? First, municipalities do limit stadium use to baseball, prohibiting other non-sporting recreational uses. In fact, multiple city directors shared with me that if you don't limit the use, you should be prepared for the space to be booked all the time for non-sporting events. Municipalities have also put in place annual action plans to limit use up front and to monitor use on an ongoing basis. These include alcohol consumption plans, neighborhood impact plans, traffic planning, and fan access plans. These plans often require the stadium to listen to neighborhood concerns and incorporate solutions that balance the interests of all parties. Other municipalities have demonstrated that they plan for the worst, not just hope for the best. Even with great planning up front, developments had larger impacts than anticipated. For example, parking needed extension into the streets and local business lots. Infrastructure changes had to be put into place. Hours of operation needed to be reduced to address neighbor complaints. Finally, most stadiums are either owned by a municipality that can manage the use through use or lease agreements, are in urban areas that have access to mass transit, or have been developed on low-value properties away from residential and high-end neighborhoods. Several contacts I made suggested that the proposed location in a business park was odd and concerning. I'm almost done, I promise. We have shared examples of information we received with you in our letters and associated attachments. We strongly believe that the proposed stadium cannot comply with existing restrictive covenants or city ordinances. Existing business owners have been expected to follow the rules. We urge you to not make exceptions for the new guy on the circle, especially when he keeps changing his tune on what he's actually proposing. This use should not be permitted in our business park. If you feel differently, we ask that you hold off in your decision-making until further review can be completed. We encourage you to spend time to make similar contacts with other municipalities and hear their lessons learned. We encourage you to seek independent noise and traffic studies that consider concert-sized crowds. We encourage you to beautify this ballpark the way you did for a car wash. We encourage you to consider the interests of the businesses that were here first and who have been dedicated and responsible members of the community. Thank you for your time and the extra time.
Dan Gotzler?
Dan Gotzler, 1399 Shoreland Lane, Oconomowoc. I live about 2 miles just north of the proposed stadium. I had a bunch of things to say, but out of respect for everyone's time, it's probably all been said, so I'm in absolute full support of the project.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Well, what did you say? I didn't hear what you said.
I'm in absolute full support of the project.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm taller than that person.
Kristen Simons.
My name is Kristen Simons. I live at 37848 Atkins Knoll Road in Oconomowoc. I live about 1.5 miles from this proposal. Can I close this computer here? So I have some specific concerns about this project, certain components of it as it applies to a land use issue. As has been previously stated, there has not been an opportunity for public comment as this applies to land use, as well as the specifics of this proposal had not been made available to the public until late last week. At the Plan Commission meeting last week, there was some discussion about this proposal. Staff did refer to a few of the things that I'm concerned about, but those comments were made after the public hearing had closed, and I was unable to address those statements. In particular, I have specific health and safety concerns about the artificial turf component of this project. Staff stated last week that the proposal includes AstroTurf and crumb rubber sand infill. He also stated that he had not seen evidence of health concerns related to this component and specifically referred to concussions. He did not mention any of the research related to respiratory concerns, immunologic disorders, endocrine disorders, MRSA infections, ACL and MCL injuries, or numerous other health concerns. I realize that this is likely not an area of expertise for staff, but as a physician, I have significant concerns for both the human health and the environmental impact of this artificial turf. The federal government also has concerns about the health and safety related to artificial turf. In fact, the research in the last decade has had so much concerns about health and safety that in 2013, the EPA and the CPSC, which is the Consumer Product Safety Commission, stated that they no longer trusted the safety data coming from the artificial turf industry. In 2016, the federal government, the EPA, the CPSC, the CDC, and the ATSDR, which is the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, began an extensive federal research study. Staff did refer to that briefly also in the Plan Commission, and I'm not sure if that's what he was referring to earlier when he said there's no environmental concerns. Part 1 of that federal study, called the Federal Research Action Plan, or the FRAP study, the results of Part 1 came out in July of this last year. The goal of Part 1 was to uniformly identify all the chemicals present in crumb rubber. It identified 356 chemicals, 200 of them are carcinogenic. I have a complete list of those chemicals and their carcinogenic classification for you to review and for the public record. This study, only Part 1 was released. Part 2 looks at exposures and will be released at a later date. From the executive summary of the FRAP study, it states neither Part 1 nor Part 2 of this study, separately or combined, will constitute an assessment of risk associated with playing on artificial turf with recycled crumb rubber infill. It specifically states it does not assess risk and does not make conclusions about safety. I'm not sure if staff was referring earlier to the environmental impact when he stated that the EPA did not find environmental impact. I'm not sure if he was referring to this study, but the federal study states on page 42 that it is not intended to evaluate the groundwater, aquatic toxicity, or soil toxicity. Yale University also conducted an extensive study to look at what is in crumb rubber. That study identified 306 different chemicals, 197 of them carcinogenic. I have that research study for you to review and for the public record.
Please wrap up.
Okay, I am not going to talk about the health implications of this field. That's for parents to review the literature and to speak with a physician or healthcare professional who is knowledgeable about the issue. There is extensive research about the environmental concerns of artificial turf, especially as it relates specifically to this piece of land, which is designated as, quote, high potential for groundwater contamination. That is a designation that is given by Sewer PAC, Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, and Waukesha County. I have that map for you to review and will submit it for your review as well as the public record. I have numerous primary research studies from Stanford University, Yale University, the Department of Park and Rec in California, from the University of Connecticut, many studies that I have the primary research for you to review that state in numerous different instances the evidence of toxicity and groundwater and water contamination runoff from crumb rubber turf. Water standards, water contamination that is well above EPA groundwater safety, as well as significant aquatic toxicity. As stated, this is significant specifically for this project on this piece of property because of the designation of extremely susceptible to groundwater contamination. I will submit all of those research studies for your review. I have a cover sheet that states exactly the research concerns that I have on those. Many people say, and I've heard it said here before, we already have turf fields, so what's the big deal? Most likely, when those turf fields were installed, community and school officials were not aware of the health implications and specifically environmental implications from crumb rubber turf. I do not know whether those fields are installed on top of a piece of property that is highly susceptible to groundwater contamination.
Please wrap up.
The developers listed very quickly a screen that showed that they stated it is not, the turf is not toxic. That, I did not see that in the packet, although they had showed that screen before. Their research, I've looked at those studies, and comes from something called the Synthetic Turf Council, which is a trade organization specifically for the synthetic turf industry. This is a summary of those research studies. It is a year worth of peer review research that looks at the studies the turf industry says that their product is safe, and it refutes those claims and talks about the flaws in the research. Most of those researchers are from Yale University. How many years have we listened to industry tell us their product is safe? Okay,
You have to wrap up.
I appreciate your time. There is extensive research showing the toxicity of crumb rubber, as well as the grass itself. The polyfluoroalkyl substances that a gentleman earlier referred to has been found in the grass from artificial turf. That also causes extensive water contamination, which has been documented in Madison, Milwaukee, Marinette, and Peshtigo. The DNR has required numerous cleanup efforts, some up to $140 million to clean that substance out of our water. Again, my concern is about this portion
I
of the
have a whole pile
proposal.
of
Okay,
cards there.
thank you for your time. I would encourage you to amend this proposal to prohibit artificial turf on this ecologically sensitive piece of property. I will submit my research for your review and for the public record.
Thank you. Tom and Morgan Newberger?
Hello, Tom Newberger, live at, 1350 Mamro Lane East here in Oconomowoc. Myself and my family fully support this project, and if it's okay with the council, I'd like my daughter Morgan to speak on our behalf, because I believe it's children like her, the rest, my other kids and children in the community that will benefit most from this project.
Hi, my name is Morgan Newberger. I go to Silver Lake Elementary School. I play lacrosse for the Oconomowoc Lacrosse Club, and I think this will be a benefit to Oconomowoc because it helps many sports practicing or playing games, and it's also great for family time. I think this will be an amazing add to Oconomowoc.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Baker?
Good evening, I'm Brian Baker. I'm President and CEO of Century Equipment Corp., 966 Blue Ribbon Circle, Oconomowoc, City of Oconomowoc. And Century Equipment Corp. has been a longtime, very stellar corporate citizen of the city of Oconomowoc. We've been operating in the city of Oconomowoc over 60 years. And we own a building that we built in 2007, a couple of doors down from the proposed development. And one of the first things I want to say is that we don't appreciate the way this development played out. We were contacted by the people that were developing the property, and they really stressed that it was all about baseball. Everything was about baseball, that's all they wanted. And then we get a couple of months into the process, and then it turns out that no, they don't just want baseball, they want concerts, all kinds of other events. And by the way, it's not just concerts and other events, but it's 365 days a year events going till midnight. And so we think that the Plan Commission last week did a reasonable compromise and limited the hours of operation of baseball. But, city ordinances and conditional use permits, they make for good neighbors. And I would encourage the Common Council to make sure that the conditional use permit that may be granted for this project has a lot of reasonable restrictions. Again, it's to make good neighbors for people that have been operating in the city of Oconomowoc for 65 years and been a stellar corporate citizen. And examples of these reasonable restrictions would be not allowing tailgating, not allowing parking on the street, a reasonable alcohol policy, no alcohol served, for example, after the 7th inning, or alcohol only to be consumed in the stadium, reasonable levels of security so people don't get out of hand, and to make sure that the traffic will be able to get in and out of the stadium without bothering their neighbors, and certainly some sort of restriction on fireworks. So again, I ask Common Council to make the conditional use permit reasonable and allow for us all to be good neighbors together. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Kier?
Good evening. Emily Kier, 37082 Silver Knoll Court. I, along with my husband and 5 children, live less than a half-mile from the proposed DCE site. My kids are locally involved in rec and select baseball. We have nothing against baseball. We have a lot of kids in baseball. None of them, however, play on a major league size field. This stadium is not for children. We cannot forget that. Yes, they'll be able to practice in the facility, but no one has mentioned the price, the hourly rate, that a lot of people can't afford, including us. We are not in favor of expanding the ballpark's daily operating hours until midnight for the following reasons. The noise from the stadium will be heard at my home, even with the windows closed, which is what the DCE representative that visited my house instructed me to do. If I've been told I will hear the noise and the fireworks and the crowd noise until midnight, that sure deteriorates the quality of life at my home. Instead of bringing our city together, this development is separating our community. As a community partner, Tom Kelnick could have called the folks together who live near the site and say, hey, I hear your concerns, they're real, and here's how we're gonna fix them so you can get behind this project. Instead, he publicly said we were effing crazy. Number 2, other Northwoods League teams have adjusted their start times to accommodate families, therefore also accommodating and respecting neighbors. If this is family-centered entertainment, it sure doesn't need to stay open until 11 or 12 at night. Also, I think it's important to note that per Northwoods League regulations, only 5 innings need to be played for it to be considered a full game. This info can be found on their website. That being said, it would be highly unusual to have a game go until 11 or 12 at night, even with a rain delay. As far as I've seen, no other outdoor venues in Oconomowoc have the consistent option to stay open with lights and speakers, crowd noise, and fireworks until midnight. Not Roosevelt Park, not the band shell, not the city beach. Imagine if there was a band shell concert until midnight 4 nights a week, or a moonlit movie 4 nights a week until midnight all summer long. I certainly don't think the citizens would appreciate that or go for it. If you could hear a baseball game 4 nights a week at your home, would you enjoy it until midnight? I ask you to consider common courtesy here. My kids attend St. Jerome in Oconomowoc. Their tardy bell rings at 7:30 a.m. They are ages 4 through 12. They need to sleep. The baseball schedule overlaps with their school schedule by 2.5 weeks. That doesn't take into consideration all the other DCE events that may hold outdoors until midnight the rest of the year, 7 days a week. During the summer, like all kids, they wake up early, go to activities, and the games would disrupt their sleep and family life all summer long. If this becomes an issue, I'm not sure anyone would like to buy a house where you hear games or events until midnight. I think this would seriously devalue my home, and no one chooses to live near a stadium. I'm sure you wouldn't. Would you choose to live near a major league-sized stadium? This was sure not zoned ballpark when we bought our house. Lastly, I hope you've taken the time to research Mr. Kelnick's other facility in Waukesha. Neighbors there are upset about the noise and light. This is from his small community fields. Unfortunately, there is not a good history of community partnership there, and frankly, is worrisome. When DCE isn't following the rules put in place in Waukesha, what will happen here? My family settled here 100 years ago. I'm a mother, I'm an educator, I have a master's degree in education. I spent an entire year researching how important sleep is for a child's developing mind. But most importantly, I'm a community member, and I see this project tearing our community apart. I have been verbally insulted and mocked, all because I care about raising my children in this great community in peace. I don't feel like I should be forced to close my windows and run the air conditioner 36 nights a year in the heat of the summer so DCE can line their pockets. We're all citizens here. I apologize, I'm nervous. Taxpaying or not, we still contribute to schools, roads, fire, EMS, and are members of the greater community, and we sure love Oconomowoc. I ask you, if this large stadium was being built near your home, would you be supporting it and allowing it to run until midnight? The pro-con list for our community sure doesn't add up on this. I ask you to please do unto others as you would have done to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Giese?
Good evening, Brian Giese. I live on East Pretty Lake Road in the town of Ottawa, actually. I come before you tonight as the director of KM Lasers Fast Pitch Club. We're a youth softball organization tied to the community education department at the KM School District. As a director, I'm in charge of making sure that we have field space and practice space available for all of our teams. We have 7 youth organization teams, ranging from 8th grade, or U8 players to U16 players. Space is extremely limited, even within the KM School District. As we ramp up for the spring outdoors portion of our season, we have teams that are practicing maybe once a week. We're competing with basketball. We're competing with other indoor sports. A facility such as this would give us the opportunity to be able to grow and develop our players that much better. The use of the outdoor facility, we run a tournament once every summer. We limit the number of teams. We actually have 6 teams at the U8 level. We have 4 teams at the U16 level this year alone that are on a wait list that want to come to our community and want to be able to play. To be able to have a facility that would be able to garner us lighting to be able to have those games would be a huge benefit to our program. Obviously, I'm very much in support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Correo?
My name is Lisa Correo. I live at 37096 Silvernell Court in Oconomowoc. I will try not to copy what everybody else has said. A lot of them has already said what I wanted to. I am not in favor of extending the hours. I don't see why it has to be till midnight. The noise, the traffic, my well contamination, I'm just not for the project at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt O'Neill?
Thank you. My name's Matt O'Neill. I'm a lawyer at Fox O'Neill and Shannon. I represent a group of homeowners in both Summit and Oconomowoc and some local property owners. and I want to make 4 points. And I'll try to do it in 3 minutes. The first, I don't believe the council has given this a proper legal consideration. I understand Attorney Riffle's frustration with the law as it was restructured, but I think the result is improper. This particular action was considered and approved, the CUP was considered and approved by the Plan Commission without allowing any public comment. And I understand, Stan, why you said that had to happen, but I think it keeps the public out. Then it comes before this body, and folks are given 3 minutes to address 2 separate proposals, both the CUP and the extension of the hours. And that's it. That's the only submission you're going to allow for the public about this particular development, which is a big deal for a lot of people on a lot of levels. And I find under the statutes, that does not comport with due process for people to be properly heard and properly considered, particularly if this council tonight takes a vote to take action and approve it. I don't think they will have had any ability to consider the materials that were submitted tonight and had never been before you before. And it's a tilted playing field, to use an analogy, because the proponents of this have had all the opportunity to meet with staff, to submit their stuff, to respond to questions, and they've had everybody's attention. And these folks have had none. So I don't think this process is proper, and I think it's challengeable if this gets approved on it. Given the importance of this issue, I don't see why the council, just as a foundational matter, doesn't step back and ask for more time and more information. Your ordinance, section 17.806, sub 7, sub D, says specifically, the council may request further information and/or additional reports from the Plan Commission, zoning administrator, city staff, and/or the applicant. And you should do that. The stormwater analysis, not done. The architectural review, it's not done. The evidence submitted tonight by the residents, not reviewed. The evidence regarding other stadiums that Ms. Eubanks referenced is really enlightening. You should really look at it. It's very informative. The report submitted by Jessica Rice about the Franklin Rock Sports Complex, fascinating. I mean, these are things you should consider. Taking that step back will also allow the council the time to properly, if it's going to be approved, put in place a proper CUP with proper limitations. And I'll just give one example. On the sound, you've heard a couple back and forth about what's going to happen with concerts. Are they just going to hook into that PA system, which has the speakers pointing down at the seats? Or are they going to be like most bands and want to have their sound from behind, which is how a normal concert operates? Well, if you take a look into that, one thing you could include, which is not in the CUP that's drafted for you, is any concert activity that is there can only use that PA system. Can't have their own backing, can't have their own bases. That's not in the CUP right now. It should be. Another thing I want to address is I don't think the applicant has met their burden of substantial evidence, which is their statutory obligation to get this approved. I think they probably have submitted substantial evidence on the ballpark. I believe they did, but not on the amendment that was submitted January 31 of 2020, which took that 36 game use and said it's going to be 365 days a year and possibly any other event. There's nothing substantive in the record that talks about what impact that will have. I'll give you one example because examples are good. Ms. Eubanks submitted evidence from other ballparks, including the Green Bay Field where the Booyah Field, great name. The Booyah Field has 2,200 seats, okay? It sounds similar to this 2,500 seats. And what do they list for their capacity when they have a concert? 8,000. So you talk about 8,000 people coming to a concert, you talk about 900 parking spots. How does that work? I'll tell you, it doesn't work. And third, I think, and this goes back to my first point, substantial evidence, which is what you need to have one way or the other, has been submitted tonight, although it's not been reviewed. And I think you need to review that, and I think that substantial evidence will show you that either this shouldn't be approved, or if it is approved, it should have a lot of restrictions. And fourth, my final point is that this proposed amendments that are tucked towards the back of the packet are really a betrayal, as Ms. Eubanks said, of the promises that were made to the businesses that located in that Pabst Farm Park. And I know, Stan, you said it's a private issue, we shouldn't stand in the way of it, but you can and you should, and this is why. Section 13.7 of those covenants specifically says, and this was promised to these folks when they invested their money, it says any modification to 3.1, to Article 9, to Article 8, to other articles has to have the approval of the council. And why is that? That's to protect these businesses that have invested their money, their time, hired employees, set up their businesses from having a change like this. The question was presented, will this change be applicable to all of the other businesses? No. I've read the proposed modification and variances, and it's applicable only to the ballpark. So everybody else in that business park will be subject to that same level of restrictions. You can only have one sign on your building. All it can say is who you are and what you do. Can't have any lights on the roof. Can't be a nuisance to your neighbors. But for the ballpark, they actually define in that proposed amendment that nuisances are allowed. They take, it's remarkably candid, and I give them credit for that, but they say it will be a nuisance. And they're gonna stuff it down the throats of these people who invested their money and their time and their efforts in this business park based on promises. And you guys, to use a final baseball analogy, you're the backstop. That's the way these covenants were set up. This council is the backstop to protect those businesses from having promises made to them pulled out from under them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the same token, they have every right to bring an action against the developer. And I want to make sure that we stay out of private issues.
I don't blame you for staying on a private issue.
As a point of order, I don't think we should have an ongoing legal debate on the floor of the council session.
Come on, we're having
Come
fun.
on.
I know, and
I'm
I'll
kidding.
get, don't worry, I'll get in the fray later as
Yeah,
well.
we got
But
3 lawyers talking now, so. Merrick Olson?
Hi, my name is Merrick Bolson. I live at West 1210 Steinway Drive in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. I'm 13 years old and I go to Nature Hill Intermediate School. I've played for the Oconomowoc 5-0s since I've been 5 years old, where it has taught me discipline, respect, good sportsmanship, and most of all, friendship. Most of the friends I have today are from my baseball teams over the years. I think this facility would greatly help me as a player and all the kids around the area too. Having this facility gives us the opportunity to practice all year round like the kids down south. Being able to spend time with my dad, my grandpa, and all of my family at the games will be super fun too. Maybe one day when I'm older enough, I can even try to get a job there. My dream is to one day maybe even play for that Northwoods League team. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Pat Leslie?
Pat Leslie, South 18, West 37130, Ottawa Avenue in Dousman. I have a cold, I'm sorry. My parents, my dad was born here in 1920, his dad in 1880, so we've been here a long time. I think I got a pretty good idea of what our traditions are in Oconomowoc, and we're very, very rich on baseball. I'll make this short. I love the whole thing. I love the stadium. I love that there'll be lights. There hasn't been a lit baseball field in Oconomowoc for 45 years. Softball, yes, but not baseball. It'd be nice for the high schools to use that and some of the local people. The indoor is fantastic. I do some coaching at the indoor in Sticks and Waukesha, and we see great things out of the kids there. Amazing things. So I'm full for this.
Thank you. Jason Bauman?
Jason Bauman, 1351 Mamro Lane East in Oconomowoc. My family, we moved out here about 12 years ago. I grew up in Heartland. I knew the area. There are great things happening out here. We're very active in the community. We go to all the events throughout the city. We love it. We think that this provides another one of those great venues, great opportunities to do a lot of family things. We sold our house back in August, and we were looking, where are we going to stay? Are we going to stay here? Are we going to leave? These are the type of things that made us stay. We just bought a house in December. We plan on retiring here. We have a 10 and a 12-year-old. These decisions, I think you should really think about families like us, that the 95% of people that I know that have kids, that my kids go to school with, play sports with, this is for us. This is 95% of people I talk to fully support this. I think you should take that into consideration. We're fully behind it, and I think you should vote yes today. Thank you.
Thank you. Chad Bauer?
Hi, my name is Chad Bauer. I live on Lake Drive in the town of Oconomowoc. I come to you tonight. I've got 13 years of experience with Northwoods League Baseball. I've been both an owner, currently a general manager down in the Rockford franchise. I was in Green Bay early on in '07, and then I was in Lakeshore, which is Mequon. I've also been part of some of the failed proposals that have been in the county. I had approvals for Frame Park in 2008, and the housing market blew up, and I lost investors, and we couldn't get it done there, but I had city approvals on that facility. This county, this is a great entertainment opportunity for this county. This is the type of thing this county needs. It's a great gathering place for people and families. One of the things that sticks with me through my years in this team has been watching all the generations of people at our ballparks. At the end of the game, kids interacting with the players, grandparents watching on. You can't get that at a lot of events around at a cost affordable, family-friendly, affordable pricing. You hear a lot of the same arguments for many facilities, especially with the baseball. You hear traffic. Well, I can tell you right now, 2,500 people, traffic. I've got a 3,000-seat stadium in Rockford. We're located in a business park, or next to a business park, I should say. But we don't have traffic issues. We're a quarter mile from a hospital. In order to go to the hospital, you have to turn at the interchange. We don't have traffic issues. By and large, the crowd's going to come. They're going to come within an hour and a half to 2 hour time frame before the game. Some are going to trickle in after the start of the game. When the game is over, fans start leaving. Actually, fans start leaving in the 5th, 6th inning. As kids get tired or whatever, people leave, and it trickles out. You very rarely have a full house at the end of the night. When it comes to concerts and things, I know it's another big concern. We did a large concert in Rockford last year, and I can tell you, I went before the Common Council in Rockford, and we had to get a special permit for that, which I imagine would happen here if they decided to go for a concert that had 8,000 people because they used the field. We had to come up with a parking plan, a traffic plan. The police we submitted a large plan with the police department, working with them to get logistics down for that. So I gotta imagine that if there was concerts and that was a concern, I think you guys will handle that with some kind of special event permits. Lighting, again, technology's gotten so great on the lighting. There's, 100 feet away from a stadium, you got 1-foot candle of light pollution. Noise, these guys are gonna put speakers inside the stadium, much like we did in Concordia. That was a huge issue for Lakeshore. The people were worried about traffic and noise, especially the noise and the light pollution as well. Noise, we put directional speakers inside the stadium to control the sound, keeping the sound levels lower. And as the game went on, as the time went on, at night, we'd turn the sound down because less people in the stadium, the sound doesn't bounce around, there's nothing to absorb the sound. I think as far as Northwoods League teams go, these are considered assets to every community that they're in. It provides entertainment for people, and affordable entertainment for people, and I think that's important. I'm strongly in favor of this, and I welcome any questions people may have for it. I can speak from 13 years of experience in the Northwoods League, and I think Oconomowoc is on the cusp of having a real gem in their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Nate, Schacht?
Hi, my name's Nate Schacht. I'm at 1333 Red Wing Drive here in the city of Oconomowoc. The reason I'm here is I have 2 young sons. We moved here in Oconomowoc about 5 years ago. Believe it or not, this is the big city for me. I grew up in Sullivan down the road. We had to drive to Oconomowoc to get groceries. So I can appreciate the people that want the rural nature of Oconomowoc, but to me, Oconomowoc's always been the big city. So my 2 boys are 4 and 8. The 8-year-old's just getting involved in baseball. We go to the Sticks facility in Waukesha, drive about 40 minutes each way to do that. Only do it about once a week, 1 month out of the year, just get ready for the season. It's an affordable option. I think it's $60 for a month's worth of lessons. For our son, he gets, away from the TV off his Kindle, getting active, doing stuff. My 4-year-old, we take our 4 and 8-year-old up to the Fond du Lac Dock Spiders games. The 4-year-old loves it. In fact, I think he wants to be a mascot for Northwoods League baseball team when he grows up. His favorite memory of baseball is meeting the Paw Patrol crew at the Fond du Lac Dock Spiders game. So he still has that picture in his bedroom. So I'm the clientele that these guys are looking for. You know, we spend $100 at a baseball game in Fond du Lac. We drive to Styx. You know, when we go to Fond du Lac, it's an hour drive. I want to stay here in Oconomowoc and experience that. I want my kids to enjoy Oconomowoc. I want my kids to stay in Oconomowoc when they grow up, and to be coming up here and talking about how, you know, their dads were in Oconomowoc and taught them baseball here, and how they're going to raise their kids in Oconomowoc and learn baseball here. So this is baseball. That's what this facility is. It's baseball. I mean, it's as American as apple pie, literally, right? I mean, that's what we always hear. So I guess I would just say that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about pollution and groundwater. I find it interesting that the university studies that they cite, most of those universities have artificial turf on their base or on their football fields. You know, I had a pamphlet that was handed to me a few meetings ago, I think by the physician actually here. I went on the website afterwards. There was a pamphlet that had concerns about the turf. I went on the website, and that website had concerns about cell phones causing cancer and how municipalities should ban campfires because of health effects, stuff like that. You know, it's become scare tactics, I guess, is some of the concerns I have with this. We now have a lawyer here, I'm assuming to scare the council into fearing a lawsuit. I guess I would say just ignore that. If there needs to be a checkbox to fight lawsuits for, you know, things that bring recreation to Oconomowoc, I'm fine if you guys put a checkbox on my tax form for that. So thank you for the time. I support this. My 2 sons want to go watch a game, hopefully in a summer or 2, and enjoy the facility. So thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Wendt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Jerry Wendt, Magna LLC, 965 Cannon Gate, City of Oconomowoc. We have 15 parcels in the City of Oconomowoc, and I'd like to first give my support to the extension of the time that they're asking for. I think the Planning Commission's recommendation is reasonable, the 7 to 11 for athletic events. And if it has to be extended because of a weather condition, that's great. The non-athletic stuff is, again, 10 o'clock. I think that's reasonable. You know, as mentioned, we could start roofing our house with an air hammer and nail gun at 7 o'clock in the morning in a residential area. This area is, you know, separated from the residential areas. I had the opportunity to pitch some of the Magna lands to the group, but I think this location is a excellent location for it. You have easy access to I-94, Highway 67. Again, like I said before, it's separated from the residential areas. If you look at it, it has 67 to the east and then a commercial area. To the south, you have, it's in an industrial park. You have the Valley Road to the south, and then the Roundy Center. To the west, you have one church and another church that's going to be built. The Village of Summit Town Hall, Dousman Road, of course, first, and then vacant land. To the north, you have the freeway system. You have another business park. You have Valley Road. You have the Target Center. So I think it's an excellent location removed from residential areas. I don't think there's another area in the city probably that would be that removed from a residential area. The job opportunities that are going to be created by the construction, you're going to have engineers out there, you're going to have heavy equipment operators out there, you're going to have masons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers. After the construction's done, you're going to have the full-time staff that's going to be at the facility. You're going to have part-time staff there during the events, the vendors selling hot dogs and hamburgers and yes, probably beer and probably soda and other souvenirs. So I think that's going to be a help. It's a great entertainment facility for the people. We've talked about that. Grandparents are going to be able to bring their grandchildren to a game, interact with players, get some autographs. Most of the guys probably are never going to play any place other than the Oconomowoc or the Northwoods League, but you might get that autograph from a future all-star. And my grandchildren might be able to say to their grandchildren, oh, Papa took me to this game and I got this guy's signature. So I'm looking forward to it. Economically, for the benefit that's going to be to the hotels, the restaurants, the gas stations, the shops downtown, I think it's going to be great.
Wrap up, please.
Sure, okay. And then lastly, I want to mention about the taxes. This was a facility that had 22 acres that was farmland. It was wheat and soybeans for the last 20 years. The 22 acres were assessed at $300 an acre, or $6,600 assessment a year, which yields $112 taxes. If they put up a $12 million facility, that's going to be $204 in tax revenue for the city. So I'm all for the project. I hope it's passed it through tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Bill Mumey?
Thank you. Bill Mumey, 1887 Mineral Springs Boulevard in Oconomowoc. Come here in front of you, thank you for the time too. Come here in front of you wearing two hats. I'm in a bit of a unique situation as far as that's concerned. I'm a youth baseball coach locally in town. Coached for 9 years locally. I'll probably get another 6 years out of me before I call it quits. My teams play and practice within a mile of this facility that's being proposed. My family's going to use this facility if it's built. We'll probably make a lot of memories there. We'll talk about it on the way home. But we want to be able to leave the experience at the stadium. As much as we'll love it, my kids will use it, they'll probably use the indoor facility. We want to leave that experience there at the ballpark. The other hat that I wear is the vice president of the HOA for Pabst Farms. So I represent the 400 or so voting constituents there. When we came into Pabst Farms, none of us, as much as all of us might love baseball or want to experience the ballpark, we don't want to hear it when we're in our backyard. So my only ask, and I'm going to keep this short, is that when you're defining the parameters by which this stadium will be allowed to operate in regarding noise, because I think that's what I'm hearing as the resounding theme here is people's fear around noise. That's the thing that could be disruptive. That's the thing that could turn this into from a great experience and a great potential for our city into something that could be potentially a negative. So what I'd ask you is just to be conservative in your approach when you're defining those decibel levels, things like that, because there's a very distinct difference between, say, 60 or 70 decibels. So I just ask you that we allow us to have the experience and allow us to have it at the stadium, not have to bring it home with us into our backyards. That's it.
Great, thank you. Mark Regal?
Thanks for your time. My name is Mark Regal. I live at 37832 Atkins Knoll, approximately 1 mile away from the proposed sports complex. I don't feel the sports complex is a good fit for this area, in part because of the concerts that it plans to hold. The topography in our area is flat, and the sound will travel easily. This will adversely affect the lots and properties in Pabst Farms. As a builder, I can tell you that people do not seek lots or homes near a sports complex that will have concerts. Property values will go down, and the lots that are not currently sold will depreciate in value. The Rock Sports Complex has had 46 documented noise complaints in the last 3 years with the Franklin Police Department. Another great concern is the inexpensive toxic turf that is being ingested and can cause cancer. This proposed site is located in the Silver Lake watershed, where there will be stormwater runoff from the field and massive parking lot into the groundwater that feeds into the lakes and wells. Other concerns include increased traffic, the 90-foot tall lights, and proposed late time frame up to midnight. For people that work, midnight is way too late for us to be disturbed with that noise. please reconsider allowing the sports complex to be built. It does not fit with the peaceful lake country setting. Depreciated home values will result from the noise, traffic, and lights. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Cohen?
My name is Ed Cohen, and I reside at 1018 North Breens Bay Road, Oconomowoc. And I moved into the community in 1982. Grew up in New York City, and I used to take the train and the bus to Yankee Stadium and to Shea Stadium. I love baseball. I played baseball. I was in Little League Baseball. I could always walk to the field where I would, or the fields where I would play. So baseball, right? Don't most people love baseball? The project sounds very attractive on the surface. But let's think about it. The Diamond Entertainment people presented a very eloquent proposal about the field, about the complex, about the training facility. Very eloquent on the surface, face value, okay? They don't have a track record of putting these kind of things together. In fact, if you want to use a baseball analogy, their batting average is 0 as far as putting proposals together in surrounding communities for a facility such as this. 0. They've been rejected by various communities. I don't know why in every case, but I'd wonder, I'd question. I think it's a responsibility of the council to question that. And in fact, what they have done, which I do know, is that, and I mentioned this at the Planning Commission meeting last week, that they have morphed, they've evolved, they've changed their proposal each time for each community to better sell their proposal, each time still being rejected. Eventually in Summit, they repealed their proposal because that land was purchased by another concern. And possibly, specifically to prevent that facility, which was a very bad fit for the location in the Village of Summit, from being built. So again, we have the people of Diamond Entertainment having a 0 track record, 0 batting average when it comes to proposing and implementing these kind of plans. On the other hand, you had 2 different business people who have a substantial track record, batting average, Ace Precision, and the other gentleman from the manufacturing plant, in that business park. They've been very successful, and they've been paying, as the owner of Ace Precision said, millions of dollars over the years. Dollars that have been paid. How much has Diamond Entertainment paid? What's their track record, as I was mentioning? The other gentleman, also, proven track record. When he's been up at bat, he's been successful, okay? I'll stop with the baseball analogies. But anyway, point is that you have those folks who know what they're talking about, and they have a tremendous stake. And when they came into that business park, they came in with certain rules they had to follow and expectations on the future when they invested, let alone the tax money, invested millions of dollars in their businesses. They expected things to be a certain way through the duration of their business lives, and they had business success. They've been here a long time, long and short. Businesses have been there and been effective, been successful. So they have a right to assume that conditions will stay the same. And Diamond Entertainment wants to radically change their vision, their dream, their environment for their future success. So their success into the future is no longer guaranteed based on the success they've had. It's all up for grabs now because of a recreational center coming into a business park. And the council has a responsibility to evaluate that and really listen to those business people. There's a physician that testified, proven record of expertise in the area of health. Look what she testified to.
Please wrap up.
About turf. Oh, okay, I'll be quick, all right? My expertise is in the field of social work. Starting in 1984, I started working with the youth of this community and their families through the auspices of the Waukesha County Human Services Department, and then later became the clinic director as a licensed clinical social worker of a very large mental health and alcohol and drug abuse clinic with offices all around the greater Milwaukee area. Now I'm retired, okay? But I help families rebuild their lives for 30 years plus, okay? So why is that relevant? Here's why it's relevant. I listen really carefully to what people say. And I've been to the summit hearings. I was at the Planning Commission meeting. I'm here tonight, okay, listening very carefully. There are good people on both sides. It's not a battle of who's good and who's evil. There are good people on both sides, okay? But if indeed you do decide that you want to have this baseball field, don't neglect the people of this community that aren't represented by everybody here. Everybody isn't of the same race, ethnicity, as vast majority of the people are here, and people have all different economic means. Not everybody can afford to go to that baseball stadium to watch a game. Not everybody can afford to go to that training facility. Kids have all sorts of needs, and for way too long, at least since 1984, the needs of other children that couldn't access, and their families that couldn't access this at all, they haven't been met. So I'd at least say, really look carefully at the turf issue, at the environmental concerns related to that, really listen to the business owners, really listen to the people that don't have a voice in terms of meeting their needs, whether it's buy discounts, scholarships at the training facility, coming into the baseball stadium, as an example, or take care of their needs in a way that has not been taken care of over the last 30-plus years in this community. So take your time. Really evaluate what's being said and give credit to the people with proven track records, myself, when it comes to helping families to rebuild their lives, a physician, and all the other business people that have spoken as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Rebecca? Melgars?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Melgaris, and I live at 1512 St. Andrews Drive in Oconomowoc. I'm here both as an individual and as a representative of Briarwood Homeowners Association, which is a neighborhood of about 82 homes. None of us hates baseball or family fun. I don't think anybody stood up here and said that. So this isn't against baseball. In fact, one reason I've been here in Oconomowoc for 14 years is because we've got a lot of great family events in our town. But we can all leave those events and go home when they're done, and currently they're all done, at a reasonable hour of 10 o'clock or so. And then those of us in Briarwood get to go back to our nice, quiet neighborhood. We have very few lights, we don't have sidewalks. I think the vast majority of us chose our neighborhood because of its nice rural feel. And our neighborhood is quiet, except on the weekends where Harley holds its events. And when Harley holds its events, we can sing along with every word of every song of every band that plays there for 3 days on end. And when we close our windows, we can hear the beat of every song that's played there over the weekend. So nobody in our neighborhood, and I know this isn't Harley, and you keep saying, we keep talking about the noise level. Nobody in our neighborhood wants to hear baseball games being called until 10 o'clock every night. We don't want to hear fireworks or air cannons until 10 o'clock at night. We don't want to hear music from concerts or festivals till 10 o'clock at night. We want the quiet of the neighborhood that we bought our homes in and that it's been for 20 years. So, like others have asked, if you do approve this proposal, I would ask you, again, to be very conservative with the noise restrictions and, what you allow to be held at this facility. Aside from the quiet, and I was not well-versed on the environmental implications or anything like that, but it seems that others are, and it really seems imperative that this council takes its time and reviews the research that people have presented to you tonight, and maybe look at some independent research too, because once this is approved, it's not going away, and if you don't do your research up front, it could just really cause problems that, as other people have said, lower home values and conflicts in the community and calls to the police, and nobody wants that. So I just ask you to please review the research and set some very reasonable limits if you do decide to approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, Hester?
Thank you. Sean Hester, 1878 River Lakes Road South. Live across the street from Bill. And I also have a property on the north side of Silver Lake that my family has owned since 1929. So like some of these other folks, we know about the community of Oconomowoc. We've been in the community of Oconomowoc for a long time. I have nothing against baseball. My daughter plays in the 5-0 softball league. But as Bill said, I don't want to hear it from my house. We have 2 properties within 2 miles of this. I think what these other folks have been saying, if you can please be considerate of the time and not extend these hours. There's only one person that I've heard so far that's in favor of all this, who lives within 2 miles of this property. Everyone else is in favor of it, lives much further away, as I'm sure most of you do as well. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Gene Bolson? Jean's not here? She left them, okay. Do we have any other comments? Seeing none, we will close those 2 public hearings. We'll move on to the next public hearing. Next one is on the Grove Street duplex, a conditional use permit. Jason, you want to give us a overview of that, quick, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We'll introduce the next public hearing briefly here.
Mayor, before we move to the next public hearing, I'd like to make a brief motion for a recess for 5 minutes.
5 minutes is fine. Take a 5-minute break.
Gotta go. I'm gonna wait.
Wait a minute. There was no second.
Second. Third. I didn't take a vote either, so.
We're not.
No, less.
You didn't?
Okay, Jason, you can go.
Gonna pass out.
Oh, wait a minute.
I may fall
Diane's not
asleep.
back.
He's the most important.
water, I think.
See it cleared out too.
Can't have a meeting without a
Oh, did you turn these off?
Ah, Diane.
You ready? Listen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Alderman. The second public hearing this evening is for the Fowler Lake Terrace condo project. This is an amendment to an existing conditional use permit. The property is located at 515 East Grove Street. It's highlighted on the screen in front of you. It's outlined in yellow. It's an existing duplex, which we approved. We approved this in April of 2018. We approved a conditional use permit to allow a duplex use in the traditional residential zoning district. The conditional use at that time stated that any major change required that the updated plans to be reviewed and approved by the city, okay? So we took a look at this at a staff level and we determined that it was a major change and that it had to come back before the Common Council. And I'll show you what happened here. The changes included, number one, they had to remove two detached garages, okay? They were gonna ask that they remove those. They were gonna extend the existing driveway out there. They wanted to build a new three-car attached or a detached garage to the property outlined in red. They wanted to add a proposed house addition and a proposed attached garage to the existing units. This was an overall net increase in rooftop of about 1,314 square feet, according to my calculations. They were also going to remove the asphalt near the road, which is shown there as a removal, and then they're constructing a berm for drainage. So as you can see, it is pretty much a fairly significant change to the parcel, and I did not feel comfortable as staff making administrative approvals to this. The use is still remaining a duplex, but the site plans is going to change. They did submit floor plans and elevations. This is the floor plan that is being proposed. This is the area that's circled there is what's pretty much gonna be new. You got the addition in the middle there, and then the 2.5-car garage, and then there's some condo storage on the far left side of the screen. The elevations are not increasing the height of the existing structure. They're just kind of going off to the side there a little bit. So the materials will be very consistent with what's out there right now. With conditional uses, we have standards that are measurable, that they must have 2 addresses, which they have, a minimum of 2 parking stalls per unit, which they'll have, 2 garbage fees, which they're paying, 2 separate kitchens, they have those, 2 access doors, 2 impact fees must be paid, 2 water laterals, 2 sewer laterals, 2 electric meters, 2 garages. They must determine that they've shown substantial evidence that conforms to these requirements, which they did last time that they were before you. It's just updating the CUP a little bit. The recommendation, this did go before the Plan Commission. They send forward a recommendation to approve the revised conditional use permit for the duplex with the conditions drafted by staff that's in your packet, per the findings in the staff report and the testimony heard during the public hearing. So I'll be available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Is there any public comment on this public hearing? Come on up.
Hello, my name is Joe Gossi. My wife Karen, we are the owners of this property. Staff presented to you, we think, a thorough review of the property or the proposed changes we would like to make. The amended CUP will comply, we believe, with the city CUP standards. The only thing that Jason said in that one picture where we showed the street on the driveway, we do not plan on taking that sidewalk or the concrete out. That's gonna remain there for parking. But we're here really to just answer any questions, and if you have any.
And we do have one lateral in our conditional use that said that we could continue.
Yeah.
Clarify that in here.
One sewer lateral.
says
One sewer lateral?
Yeah.
That was approved last time, but I just want to make sure there's no.
Okay, that's okay, Jason? Okay.
Still two total, though.
There-
Total laterals.
No,
You're adding
Up
them.
there, he said that,
there's
he
one.
put up there two, there is one in the conditional use permit.
There's one
From
sewer
last
lateral right
time,
now.
we complied with that, and it said that it was okay, it's number 7, that we could leave the one. Do you want to see it, Jason, or number 8? No, it just says on, the existing sewer lateral can remain and serve both units. Condominium association. And the billing will go to the association. Responsibility of the association. Want to make sure that we're all right?
Right there, the standards were shown that they must have two, but the council agreed that since it was a single family being converted to a duplex, that the one lateral was there and that you were in acceptance of the one lateral at that time.
And then you split the cost.
Right.
Yep. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing. We'll open the next public hearing on the unnamed car wash conditional use permit.
We have the unnamed car wash. Previously, it was called the Lake Country Car Wash. This is another amendment to a conditional use permit, so that's kind of common tonight. This was granted a full conditional use permit by the city in October of 2019. The plan since changed due to some higher costs than what was anticipated and a change in the direction by the applicant. So it wasn't completely a cost-driven, but that was a factor of it. Revised plans were submitted to the city and asked for our thoughts and our feedback, and I said that is a major change, and that again has to come back before the City Common Council, that I don't have the authority to approve that. So where we're at with the architectural, they did come before for a consultation. They received very good feedback. They have submitted updated plans for the March meeting. They just kind of missed a deadline, but the general consensus of the architectural was they were comfortable with it. The Plan Commission saw these plans last week and they recommended approval. So the site location is just south of the Quick Trip on Summit Avenue there. It'll be served by access through the Oconomowoc Parkway through a private drive. We think the name of that may be Water Place, but that is yet to be figured out. It's a 30-foot wide existing easement serving this property. The Common Council did approve a certified survey map to create the lot that was approved. This is what it looks like. Just Quick Trip is to the north there, and there's the 30-foot wide easement to serve that. Now, there has been some minor changes with the site plan. I just wanted to point those out so you don't, it's full transparency here. The one on top is the previous one that was approved. You can see the square footage was just over 4,300 square feet. The new one is about 3,300 square feet, so it's about 1,000 square feet less there. The concrete walkway from the stalls is now asphalt. Some of the curbing was removed, but the overall direction and everything is very similar. The stacking lanes and everything else is all there. One of the biggest changes, though, is the architecture. I tried to take the same perspectives that they provided, and I even tried making the cars the same size, so the scale is understandable that the new one is proposed as the right side. It's the white barn-type architecture. What we approved previously was the masonry building over there, so it's a little bit different. It's a little bit shorter. It's a little bit smaller in size, but this is the new one that they're asking for. You can see the curbing compared from one to the other is missing, so it's a little bit different. This is the perspective from the north side, traveling down Summit Avenue. That's what you would see. The Architectural Commission asked that these doors be brought all the way to the ground and some shutters be put on here, so I didn't include that rendering. This is the exit. The poles are going to be exactly the same as the Common Council approved. There's no change there for the lighting, so I wanted to show you what you previously approved. Landscaping, there was some slight changes. This is the new layout. The Plan Commission said vehicles exiting the car wash will be shining their headlights directly onto 67. They asked for some plantings between the roadway and the exit. So we will make sure staff can administratively approve some updated shrubbery in that area. This site does sit a little bit lower than the road, but we still want something to filter that headlight glare. Again, we have the use is for vehicle service, the conditional use. You've already seen this. We felt that it did meet all of the standards about the main service must be inside the building, no outside storage, all vehicles shall be parked in stalls, security cameras, customer service hours between 7 and 9 p.m., and comply with all other city ordinances. So those have already been on the record as they've complied with those, but it is a slightly different site plan. The Plan Commission did motion to recommend the conditional use permit to the Common Council on February 12th and motion to approve the major design review plans contingent on approval by the council this evening. Planning staff recommends approve the CUP per the findings of the planning staff report and the testimony heard during the public hearing this evening. I'd be happy to answer questions during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Do we have any public comment on this proposal?
Good evening, Council. John Coots with MSI General, P.O. Box 7, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. We are the design and builder for the project you see here, and just wanted to state for the record that everything does meet the conditional use permit procedures and answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, we will close that public hearing, move on to regular business. First item is to approve the minutes from the January 21st, 2020 meeting. Do you have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? It's passed. We open this up for comments and suggestions from citizens on any other subject that we haven't talked about yet. Is there anybody else that would like to talk about anything else? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We need a motion tonight we have four items on there. We have licenses, a resolution approving 2019 continuing appropriations, a budget amendment for grants and donations from 2019, and also Northeast Region Project from 10/1 through 12/31, and the treasurer's report. So we need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any comments, questions?
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to pull B and C out and vote on those separate, just because I think those are both in essence amendments to the budget, and I think it's important that we vote on something like that separate than just lump it into the consent agenda.
Fine. So we will have the consent agenda with items A and D. So we need a motion to amend the,
Second on her motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
okay. But we need a motion then, okay. So it's an amended consent agenda, less items B and C?
So moved.
Okay, it's already been seconded, so. Any questions? Seeing none, we have an amended motion on the consent agenda. Call the roll.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwark.
Aye.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Tavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
So now we have item B on the consent agenda, the resolution approving 2019 continuing appropriations. We need a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second?
Comments, questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Rogers?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item C of the consent agenda, the budget amendment for 2019 grants and donations received in the Northeast Region project from 10/1/19 to 12/31/19. We need a motion to approve the budget amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is one I did have a little bit more of a question on. A couple of the other points I brought up in committee, I'm not going to bore everyone with that tonight. But this Northeast Regional project, I don't understand where that is. I guess if I missed it.
In this one.
What are we doing with the Northeast Regional project?
But Lori?
Oh, okay. This is expenses for the regional project development? And what is this related to?
Matt, that's the Northeast Region project where St. Matthews went, the city park went, the development, that was our shared project,
Okay.
private-public partnership.
So this is to true up the expenses and put them
That's
out to
correct.
everyone, St. Matthews, whoever owns
Yep,
their share?
that's correct.
Have those gone up from what our projections were when this was voted on?
Has the total amount gone up? Yes.
By how much? Can you give me a percentage? Or do we budget for this to go up? Do we know if we have enough money?
Okay, so the funding.
Because our city share is part of it, right? So St.
That's
Matthews
correct.
pays
The
some.
city share is
school
coming
district pays some,
from
right?
park impact fees.
Okay.
Yep, and there have been change orders on this project, Matt.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Alderman Rozak?
Nay.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Nay.
Alderman Zwart?
Nay.
Alderman Stray?
Nay.
Alderman Kavieski?
Nay.
Alderman Rogers?
Nay.
Okay, so that's in. Yep, can't pay the bills. Okay, moving on to committee reports, public services. First item is consider act. What?
I'm sorry, maybe I'm confused. Did we do the rest of the consent agenda,
Yes.
the licenses?
Yeah.
I
That
missed
was
something.
That
Okay,
was the amended one.
all right.
3-5.
Under committee reports, first item is consider act on a resolution 20-R2858, awarding engineering services for Thackeray Trail Extension Phase 1 construction management. We need a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Mark?
Thank you, sir. The extension of Thackeray Trail Phase 1 was approved in December of last year for the construction. We went out and did an RFP for the construction management services. That's the item that's before you tonight. We received 2 proposals. We reviewed them and scored them following our system. Bloom is the company that scored highest on the technical, and they had the lower cost of the 2 firms, so they're being recommended for the work.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Derek Zwart. I know he's leaving as an alderman shortly, but he worked tirelessly on changing our RFP process, and the council made some pretty tough votes and spent a lot of time going back through this. And here's an example of where we've saved what I think is significant funds on construction management. In this case, this is about 6% of the total project price. In years past, we were at 10, 12, 15%. So I think this is a big win for the city, and thanks, Derek, for all your hard work on that one.
Thank you, Derek.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Alderman Stray?
Nay.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Rogers?
Aye.
Under utility, consider act on a resolution 20-R2857, awarding engineering design services for digester cover replacement and HVAC upgrades. We need a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second. Kevin?
The wastewater department requested proposals for engineering design services for the digester cover rehab and the HVAC upgrades. We advertised in the newspaper. We received 5 inquiries for the project and 5 firms provided responses. We followed the city's QBS process, and Applied Technologies came out as the firm that we're recommending. So based on the QBS process, the review team is recommending the engineering services of Applied Technology for the design services for the digest recovery rehab and HVAC upgrades in the amount of $112,134.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, just again, we've got a lot of people here. People are watching on TV or YouTube. This is another one of our changes to the RFP process, which was to force these folks to come in and give us lump sums. And again, this is something you guys don't see a lot of, but we spent a lot of time in committee of the whole discussing this and hashing this out. And here's another example where it worked, because we had companies submit hugely high bids, and then we had a couple that submitted good bids with good QBS points, and it worked. And we know that we're not gonna pay them 15, 20, 30, 40% more when the project's done. And that's a huge win for the taxpayers, and I hope people appreciate that.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Alderman Stray. Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
Next item is consider an act on a final resolution 20-R 2855, levying special assessments for the Valley Road water main extension. We need a motion to approve the final resolution.
So moved. Second.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The Valley Road Water Main Extension Project was previously approved in 2019, and the special assessment, the preliminary resolution for the special assessment was also approved in 2019. The project is now complete, and the final costs are known. The cost of the special assessment per rec is less than what we anticipated, and we also have waivers signed by all the property owners, so that waived the public hearing for that tonight. So we're looking for the recommendation to approve the final resolution.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
Okay, on the Plan Commission, without objection, we're going to move a couple things up so that the baseball ones will be at the end of the Plan Commission recommendation. So I'm going to move item D up to the top. Consider act on a conditional use permit for Fowler Lake Terrace condos at 515 East Grove Street. We need a motion to approve the conditional use permit.
So moved.
Second.
So this is a change to the existing conditional use permit. Any comments or questions? Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, the only question I had at the Plan Commission was, do the additions that you're doing meet all the setbacks for the property? Great, thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion on the floor? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Matt.
just based on the materials presented, the presentation by the owners, and the planning and staff report, I believe that once again, they've substantially complied with our CUP process there, items A through F, for that duplex.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
Okay, next item is consider act on a conditional use permit for an unnamed car wash at approximately 1600 Summit Avenue. We need a motion to approve the conditional use permit.
So moved. Second.
Any comments or questions on this item? Dean, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to make this meeting go long. The only thing I don't like about the new proposal is the curb. The lack of curbing inside the project. It just seems like it's not going to fit with the rest of. So Jason, if you could comment on that. I don't even know if we can make any changes to that, or overall I'm fine with the design, but the rest of that area has curbs and has islands with curbs. If you go over to like Firestone and those other areas, if we change that look, I think it's going to make it look kind of goofy there. That's not a technical term, goofy, but you know.
It's a legal term.
Is it legal? Okay.
That's Mickey
I agree with you, Alderman Rozak. It was one of my concerns when I noticed they weren't curbing. I contacted the applicants and said, you know, hard pressed to get up here and support a project. At that time, there was no curbing anywhere. And I drove up and down the corridor of 67 and I couldn't find any developments without curbing, you know, it's all curbed. The compromise came back, they said they'll curb the outside of the perimeter of the parking lot, and that's mostly to control drainage and things, but you're right, the inside, I thought it was important for me to share that with the council, that the inside will not have curbing, and one of the reasons for that is a cost savings measure. Curbing is very expensive, and that's one area that they could still have money into the building, but yet keep this project in budget, and I'm sure the applicant can speak to that, but I did research that, where the city has no ordinance that requires curbing, so I was hard pressed to say denial of it, but it's up to you.
Is there any portion of the CUP on this project for the car wash that would allow us to put that condition back in, that they put curbing? I mean, if it's not required by ordinance, I don't know that we can put it in.
Not required by ordinance, it's not one of the standards for CUPs, so
I know the applicants are here. I mean, is it, you're just moving, yeah, if you want to talk on it, you're just taking the curbing out to save money, right?
Come on up.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, now we're opening up the public hearing again, aren't we?
Just one question, go
Is
ahead.
that a problem, Stan? I mean,
Well, I mean, you closed the public hearing, but
No, one
well, then
comment.
we don't have,
Hang on,
yeah, we didn't have, how are we supposed to
Fine.
get him to answer
No.
questions? Okay.
well,
one comment, come on.
we're gonna reopen the public hearing. And then if anybody else wants to talk tonight, they'll be able to talk.
Sure, just to address the question on the curbing, we did add the curbing around the perimeter of the site, and the main concern, there certainly was a financial concern with the entire rework of this project, but then also the stormwater conveyance was a little bit tricky on this site because we do need to take the stormwater almost 650 feet to the east to connect that old schoolhouse road. And so the grades on this site, as Jason mentioned, are slightly lower than Summit Avenue. And as goofy as it may sound, to actually get all the grades to work, it was getting down to a matter of inches to get everything to work appropriately and also maintain proper site balance from a cost standpoint. So we did actually drive around throughout quite a few of the adjoining business parks, and not everything is curbed consistently throughout that part of Oconomowoc, but certainly around the perimeter seemed to be a consistent theme, so we wanted to follow that. So, does that answer your question?
I think so, thank you.
Is there anybody else that has a question or a comment? Go ahead.
I just have a quick comment. I didn't catch the curbs, but I noticed the design's a lot better in your last thing. It looks much nicer. But you did cut down 1,000 square feet, so that means you're just gonna put Volkswagen Beetles through there because they're smaller and they'll get there.
Any other comments or questions? Now I'm going, go ahead, Lou.
Does reduced size impact the number or volume of cars that can be serviced?
Okay? No other questions? Now I will close the public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on the conditional use permit? Seeing none, we have a motion. Do we have a motion in a second?
Yes, we do.
Call the roll, please.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Rogers?
Aye.
Next item is consider act on a certified survey map to combine, reconfigure property lines of the city and Oconomowoc campus, City of Oconomowoc campus parking lot and property at 155 West Wisconsin Avenue. We need a motion to approve the certified survey map.
So moved.
Second.
Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. The item before you tonight goes back to about 2015 when we started the campus parking lot project. All the lands over there were either owned by the city or the bank. As we laid out the parking lot, we wanted to make sure that each entity had the appropriate amount of land and parking spots, through the development. We also set it up so that the property line would run in a way that if a fence were ever built across there, we would be able to access, each entity would be able to access their lands. So the CSM before you tonight changes land ownership on a couple parcels and then defines that new lot line.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Call the roll, please.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Shaw?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Alderman Zwart?
Aye.
Alderman Stray?
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski?
Aye.
Alderman Rogers?
Aye.
Okay, moving back up to item A, consider act on an ordinance 20-0976 to amend section 17.108, conditional use specific standards of the City of Oconomowoc zoning code relating to 6A, general outdoor recreation, commercial hours of operation. Go ahead.
Are we putting the cart before the horse on this? Because if we consider A, that's assuming that we're going to approve the conditional use permit. Shouldn't we be dealing with the conditional use permit first and then amending for the hours? If
The hours,
Issue the
No.
conditional use permit unless you amend the ordinance, because it's not a permitted conditional use. It's not an allowable conditional use.
Okay,
you have to do that first.
okay.
But I have no problem with you talking about
All
the
of it?
global situation, because you can't,
Right.
can't pull them apart.
Go ahead, Andy.
I love baseball, and that's a beautiful thing, but I don't care to try to make an educated decision on the business side of this tonight at all. There's way too much information that I gotta process before I can make a good decision, and I feel like it's a fairly clean process, but I still think it's messy, and I still think there's questions that need to be answered, so my thought is, I believe a motion to table this for at least a month so we can truly dig into this and get a better, honest answer is wise for this council.
Can I ask the question of the applicant? By delaying this a month, is that going to affect your schedule? I know that you're looking to have something ready by next summer, the 2021. By delaying this a month, is that going to impact your schedule?
Respectfully, yes. There's no question that by delaying the vote tonight, it will delay our project. You know, we're in a situation where we've presented our information, we've presented our findings. We have a contingent of people that, without question, and I'm not here to disparage what they're saying, but the reality is that they don't want this project. They've provided you with a lot of information. It was the same information that we've seen when we were in the Villages Summit. It's not gonna change. The reality is that there's a contingent of people that don't want it. We're respectful of that. We've done everything that we can up until this point to provide the information through our consultants. They're here. We've paid for them to come here. We would highly encourage you to ask questions. They're here for a specific reason. We are, without question, asking you to dive into this tonight. I mean, this has been a long process for everybody. By delaying it, we're just prolonging it for another 30 days, and we're gonna hear the same information all over again.
So as a point of order, I'd like to be consistent with what we do here, Stan and Mayor. Did this reopen the public hearing by asking him a question? And if we ask his people questions tonight, are we reopening the public hearing?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, because there are questions that I have for his consultants, so if that's the case, you know, I think procedurally, we should do this in a different way where we start asking those questions during the public hearing so all the people that come can hear it. Because I mean, and I don't care how we do it, frankly, but that should happen. If it means we reopen it, we reopen it. If it means we reopen it in 2 weeks, you know, can we do that? I guess that's my question. Can we table this for tonight?
You
And
can adjourn this public hearing to a date and time certain if you give the appropriate notice. It's required under your ordinance and the statute. You can do that. This may be one where you say, we're gonna take get everybody together a half a day or something.
yeah, so My position on that is, I think, I agree with Andy. I think tabling this now is a good idea. It's actually very distasteful that's happened to me on other commissions where people bring information in the night of, and JAM, I think, Stan's familiar with what I'm talking about. Hundreds of pages of documents for us to read. However, in the quasi judicial function, I think it would be, in my opinion, as an alderman, improper for us to not table this until we get a chance to review some of that materials. I mean, we can't say that we honestly looked at anything. We got presented with a lot of materials, and I believe if we grant the CUP tonight, there are other inconsistencies in the statutes and the ordinances. Specifically, if we change 17.1086, it's inconsistent with 17.212, which is the noise ordinance, which says you can't have noises past 10 o'clock. So if we allow them to go past, they'll be in violation of another ordinance that we're not changing before granting the CUP. So there's some technical problems here that need to be addressed, and I don't think we can address them all tonight, because we don't have that other ordinance in front of us. Not to mention looking at the materials.
Go ahead, Kevin.
In the past,
Go ahead, sit down.
we have made decisions with very little information, and some of it's been good, some of it's not. I think we've got to do diligence here, because if this passes, this is something that's going to be with us for a very long time. I can think of some projects that were approved, and we look back at them now and say, why did we do that? Not we, because we weren't on council, but there were other councils, and that's one of the reasons why I ran. We have a due diligence here. We have to make sure that what we're doing is good for the public, good for Oconomowoc, and makes sense. We've been given a lot of information, a ton of information. And for respect of the individuals who gave us that information, we should look at that information and then judge our opinion solely on the evidence associated. What I heard tonight was those individuals who were for the park. Well, I'm in favor of it. Thank you. But then another individual would come up, and if they were opposed to it, they would have backing. They would be up there for 10 minutes. I personally, I love baseball. I like going. As a matter of fact, I love baseball. I just do. But I want to make sure that I look at all of the information before I actually make my final decision. I've said this before. I've absolutely said this before. On too many occasions, we've done things just because we wanted to go ahead and get it done with and move on. This we can't do.
I got a suggestion. We're not gonna be able to make a decision tonight, I can see that. And I wanna be respectful to the applicant, so my proposal would be to postpone this to a date and time certain, which would be the next council meeting, which would be March 3rd. That gives us 2 weeks to review the information, to digest it. If we need to, we will have a committee of the whole meeting prior to, can we have a committee of the whole meeting prior to it to discuss it?
You need to, if you don't want to republish, go through all of the, hoops.
Right.
You have to adjourn this public hearing, which you have reopened, essentially.
Right.
To a, not now,
Not now.
to a date and time certain.
And we have heard the public input, so I think this would be the input of the aldermen to the applicant and their consultants on that date.
We're
Correct?
going to close the public hearing and not reopen the public hearing on that night.
No, we have to have it open, don't we?
There's going to be arguments that you allowed somebody else to talk after you close the public hearing. So my recommendation, you know, to try to bulletproof it.
So
would
then
be-
open it up to all the other?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what
I'm
we'd have
okay
to
with
do.
that. I think
Then
that's a good
we'll-
idea.
That's what we'd have to do then.
Before we do anything, can we have a chance to talk?
Hang on a second.
Sitting here listening all night.
Okay. Go ahead, Derek was first.
All right, well, we've sat here and listened to 3 hours' worth of discussion. I think we should at least discuss what our concerns are before we leave tonight, so that everybody knows what we're concerned about, and we can focus on those over the next 2 weeks, rather than just shutting down and going home, because I don't want to do that. It's fresh in our minds, we just heard it. We don't know all the facts, but we should discuss some stuff that's our major concerns, so maybe everybody's, if we get to a point where we don't have to vote on it tonight, but
No.
let's talk about it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Want me to right now? Just
Well-
get started?
Yeah, might as well.
Sure.
Did you have something?
Well, I have a question, is where in this public hearing process do we ask questions? Because
Yeah.
we
Right, we never
listen to
get-
everybody talk,
right.
and then public hearings close, and yet I have some questions on things that I heard.
For the applicant?
Yes.
And
To confirm some things, and yet if I ask that question, then I'm reopening the public hearing.
Public,
So
as
where
far as
do-
I'm
when do
concerned,
we
the
do
public
that?
hearing's still open. Right now.
How,
You see, the one
Hang
concern,
on.
no, how is this any different from our other meetings when we make a motion on something second and then we have discussion, but we're not opening up a public hearing
Because
again?
we want
He
to
has
talk,
questions.
we want to talk to the
He
applicant.
has questions of people in
we-
the audience.
But
And-
we've
and-
had
right.
other situations, discussions where we talk to an applicant and we're not reopening a public hearing.
It wasn't a conditional use setting.
Yeah. So what I think we, as a point of order, I think what we should do is make the motion to adjourn to the date certain. And then we can discuss the adjournment and I think why some of our concerns are there for the adjournment. Would that make sense? Or just discuss it now? Discuss some of the issues now. I like Derek's idea.
Why wouldn't we?
Yeah, we should.
Proper way to do it.
But I like
Can we
his
close the
idea.
public hearing and then have
Hang on, hang
discussion?
on.
He was talking about making a motion. He's an alderman, he has the authority to make a motion.
Well, I'm asking you if that's the appropriate time for us to discuss on the amendment.
I would, you
Or
know,
the
if you
adjournment,
wanna,
rather, I'm sorry.
let's first figure out whether you're gonna open the public hearing again tonight and ask questions of folks that are here. Or you're gonna ask them to come back and ask them questions then.
I think we should ask them to come back, would be my opinion, for a later date. And we discuss some of our concerns tonight so that we go into the next meeting with kind of eyes wide open.
But Charlie was concerned because he wanted to ask questions tonight.
Right.
I wanted to clarify some things, yes.
I think we reopen, I think the best thing is like, if we have questions for them now, or if he has a question now that he wants to get the answer to, we reopen the public hearing, ask questions of the consultants and of the applicant.
Okay.
And then adjourn the public hearing to a date specific, which would be March 3rd, to continue the public hearing with input from whoever else wants to speak. So we're going to limit it just to the council members asking questions of the consultants and the applicant. Can we do that?
Or anybody from the other side, if you want.
We want to ask them questions?
You're on,
We have to.
So we'll reopen the public hearing, and we will ask questions of the applicants and the consultants since they are here. Alderman Shaw, you had questions? You want to have them come up to the microphone?
Sure, I'll start.
And you
One of
may
the-
need your consultants available too.
Yep, they're right there.
One of the concerns seems to be about sound,
Get them up.
Yes, sir.
okay? And I believe during your presentation, I heard you say that you will adhere to all the city ordinances about sound. Did I misunderstand that? Because
No.
if you are adhering to the city ordinances on sound, what's the complaint?
I think it's a great question, and to answer that question, yes. I mean, again, if I understand it, Jason, the ordinance is a function of, well, and you're familiar with the ordinance as well, maybe you should be, you're in a better position to speak to that.
Sure. Hello,
State your name and who you're with.
of course, David Etlinger. I'm an acoustics consultant with the Tulaski Group. We produce this report. And the ordinances for noise, as we understand them, are defined by allowable noise limits at residential, commercial, or industrial receiving properties. So the properties that are being impacted by sound. There are different limits defined for daytime versus nighttime activities. And as currently written, daytime runs from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the noise ordinance. As a function of the design of the permanently installed sound system, there would be provisions to control the levels that are being output, and those could be adjusted in order to maintain compliance with the noise ordinance. That answer your question?
Yes, so that you will be complying. If there's other events that are going to be using the sound system, is it just the sound system that you have installed, or are they going to be able to put their amplifiers into your sound system?
Present time, what we're proposing is that, that they would be using the existing sound system.
Only.
Only, yes, at the present time. And, you know, in regards to concerts, and more specifically, you know, the change in terms of how we've altered our development, you know, we've done that specifically as a function of listening to the public, right? I mean, when we were typically talking about just a ball field, the dependency on running a number of other events was significantly greater. I mean, we're standing in front of you and we are proposing to build this on our own dime. We're not asking for any funds. It's a for-profit business. We've never hid from that, and it's important to know that's where we're at. The reality is what we've done is we've listened to public comment and we've identified the fact that we have some expertise, specifically as a function of my partner when it comes to indoor training, that provides us with a different annuity stream financially. And really what it does is that our focus is on athletic development and providing an opportunity to run sporting athletic events. When it comes to these outdoor concerts, it's secondary. We are not concert promoters. We are not insinuating that in any way, shape, or fashion. But truthfully, at the same time, it is an opportunity to generate revenue, specifically, though, if it's done in the right way.
Okay, can I keep
Go ahead,
going as long as I got?
Yeah,
I have another question having to do with security. Somebody was concerned with who was going to be doing the security at any event. Is that going to be our police department, or is it security that you provide?
No, it would be security that we've provided, that we would provide. We've been in conversations with different security firms. It would be our expectation that the city of Oconomowoc would not be interested in subsidizing the expenses associated with monitoring our facility from a security standpoint.
Thank you.
Okay, Derek, you had your hand up. You're going next.
I was just going to say, as far as you indicated that any concerts that would be as part of the ball game, you would run it through your system. I would think if you have other amplification, if they're bringing their speakers in there, that would require a special permit event type thing. That would be my recommendation anyway.
Correct.
Is that if they have music that's going to be not using their system, that it needs a special permit, that would trigger something like
Well,
that.
one of my thoughts, and I talked this with some of the other aldermen, or just in passing, was that this is a baseball facility, first and foremost. Anything above and beyond athletic events would, to me, would require a special permit. If you're gonna have a concert, a political event, whatever, you're gonna have to come to
You
the
guys can live
city
with that?
with specifics and get a permit. So I think really the only thing that we want to approve in the conditional use permit is the use of the facility as an athletic facility. Anything above and beyond that would be special permits, just like anybody else would do. Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, there was a concern about AstroTurf. Why is it that, would you consider using grass? Why would you or would you not?
It's a very slippery slope from the perspective that if we're now talking about grass, now we're talking about a tremendous amount of water consumption. We actually have the utility bills from the La Crosse Northwoods franchise as well as the Rockford franchise, and the amount of water that is required to keep that playable is significant. So, you know, from our perspective, is it an option or a consideration? Bluntly, no. You know, again, we're talking about a concern. We can appreciate the fact that there's concerns. Again, I think of it as being a slippery slope from the perspective that when you really do a deep dive into the toxicity associated with artificial turf, you know, for the number of studies that are out there, there are also studies that are contrary to that. So, you know, at the end of the day, we're talking about 3 acres of turf, okay? And again, being considerate of the individuals that are here from a groundwater contamination, it is a little bit challenging for us to kind of look at that through that prism when, at the same time, the proposal that we had in Summit was on 57 acres of farmland. I can't say this verbatim, but it would be an assumptive premise to believe that they were using fertilizers and pesticides. What was the issue then? I mean, there was no discussion on it. Now, all of a sudden, groundwater contamination is a major issue. We're talking about 3 acres of artificial turf.
Well, I just, one other thing, and then, okay. I guess her name is Crystal Simmons? Yes. Okay. How old are those reports that you had, yes, please. Is that okay?
No holds barred now.
Ding, ding, ding.
Kristen Simons, 37848 Atkins Knoll Road, Oconomowoc. I'm responding to a question from Alderman Ellis. The reports that I submitted all have their dates on them. Most of them are from the between 2010 and 2019. Most of them 2017 to 2019. They're very recent, the reports that I have. And as the developer stated, there is lots of information out there, which is why I've done, tried to do my due diligence and provide you with primary research, not somebody says. It's all primary research from reputable universities and government agencies. The developer had not, at least that was available for public viewing, provided any data about the environmental safety of this field. I'm not going to go into the health effects, even though I'm a physician. That's not a land use issue. I tried to make my comments a land use issue, and that's where my concern is in the susceptibility to groundwater toxicity of this parcel. In the town of Summit, I had those same concerns, but the developer repealed his application prior to the public hearing about land use. So I did not have an opportunity to raise those concerns at that time. That answer your question?
Yes.
Karen?
Thank you. I don't think it's unfair.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's unfair that we all have these questions tonight. We are put in this position, this quasi-judicial position, to be convinced with substantial evidence that they've complied with all of these things. And that's where we've gotten to this point. A couple of concerns that I have besides some of the groundwater contamination is the mayor spoke to perhaps doing like a temporary use permit for all of these other things. However, the CUP application was already amended to include concerts, festivals, ceremonies, all these other things. So would we have to amend that out and then have them apply?
The way it works is you decide
Mhm.
what's in the conditional use permit.
Mhm.
And if it is as simple as saying that there shall be nothing other than athletic events without coming to the common council with specific information related to that event or events, and that you would have the opportunity to approve it, or down the line, you give guidelines to staff and say, so long as they do X, Y, and Z, staff can't handle it. But that was the mayor's suggestion. Anything other than athletics comes in to the common council for a special event permit.
Okay, my other concern regarding the concert thing is that we've heard from other individuals that a venue of this size can hold 8,000 people for a concert. Where in the heck are all these people going to park?
And that would
That
come
is a
into play with
huge-
your
yeah.
review of the event, you know?
You know, and then if they came in with a concert that had 3,000 people and had all sorts of noise and all sorts of problems, they wouldn't get another concert. I mean, that's pretty much our control. If they don't follow the rules, it doesn't matter if it's them or if anybody else. they don't follow the rules, they don't get another event. Because that's why you keep it as a special use permit. Go ahead, Lou.
I have a question in regards to the artificial turf, if you could please come back up. Was any of the information that you presented definitive in regards to restriction or prohibition in regards to application in any municipality or district that you've done any of that research in?
So I'm not sure I understand your question.
So my question is, you stated there's negative research, or there's research that has been done that shows negative impact.
Correct.
For the materials
Correct.
that are being proposed. But we heard testimony that there's also research that is on the other side of that aisle. But at the end of the day, is there any research that reflects any municipality, federal, state, or local, that prohibits or restricts those materials for use?
Many. Some of my comments, there's many communities in particular, smaller communities like ours, throughout the US as well as Europe, who have placed moratoriums on building any new turf fields. As recently as February of 2019, Connecticut joined New York, New Jersey, California, and Minnesota to introduce legislation to place a statewide moratorium on building any new turf fields because the health and safety data is just beginning to come out. Again, this is longitudinal data. It's not something that can be done in 1 or 2 days or even a week. Sweden considers crumb rubber to be hazardous and recommends no new fields containing it be installed. Italy considers crumb rubber to be carcinogenic. Spain wants them regulated because of their risk to the health. And the Netherlands has completely banned crumb rubber fields. Does that answer your question?
In the US?
In the US. There's numerous, I don't have the list of the communities. I have that documentation. I can provide that for you. There's a number of communities in both the East and the West Coast that have put moratoriums on them until the final research comes out. People are hoping that this big federal government study, the FRAP research study that I referred to earlier, is going to answer some questions. Only part 1 of that has come out so far, and that's the one that listed all the different chemicals, the 350 plus, the 200 of which are carcinogens. That study then, the next phase is to look at exposure. Although it states within the study, again, the study itself states it's not going to assess risk, and it does not at all look at environmental concerns.
So there's nothing published as of right now?
There's many things that are published from individual independent universities,
Right.
that type of thing,
But
correct.
from our federal government, there's nothing
Correct.
published as of
Correct.
right now?
And, and not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean there's not. Jason referred to something from the EPA earlier that said there's no environmental effect. I would be interested in knowing what that research is that he's referring to.
Matt?
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting night. I think it is important for us to take some time. When I first saw the proposal, I was pretty positive on it. I think there's a lot of good with the proposal, positive impact on tax base. I think it's a good attraction for the area, and entertainment options for families is great. I don't have huge concerns with the landscaping, the design, and some of the other parts of the project, but some of the concerns the folks did raise are interesting. And before I get into a few of those concerns, I'll echo what Karen said. As the CUP is written right now, there's a blank check for anything they want to do without having to come back for a permit. And I think the mayor's correct. That's the right way to approach, is to amend that part of it. It also, and Jason, you probably should take notes on some of these, if we change 17.1086 and let them go till 11 o'clock at night, if they're doing anything past 10, they're in violation of our noise ordinance, because our noise ordinance reduces the level of noise in a commercial area immediately at 10 o'clock. Between 10 and 7 a.m., it's supposed to be reduced. So if they're even operating after 10, they'll be in direct violation of that. So we're inconsistent in our ordinances. So by the next meeting, we're gonna have to fix that. Either give them an exception to that or do something with regard to that. Because right now, if we grant the CUP, they'll be in violation of that if they operate past 10. As far as the conditions, And the noise, I think specifically. I think, look at the Tlaski report on the last page of the amendment that we were submitted. If we allow them to do all these other things that they added, and again, I'm concerned about how that got added in at the last hour here. That's very concerning to me. But the general exemptions actually cited in their report, which is part of our statutes and our ordinances, says parades, concerts, festivals, fairs, or similar activities subject to any sound limits established in the approval by the city and approved by the appropriate city departments. That's a general exemptions to the rest of the sound ordinance for those specific activities. Their stuff is way too broad in the amendment to their CUP request. We have to figure out how to get that out and go back to baseball. If they want to come back and do, a special event, they've got a political event or whatever they want to do, they have to do like anybody else that goes and rents Roosevelt Field and they get a permit. And I think that's a fair thing to do because it's consistent with what we do with everybody else in the city. A couple other issues we're going to have to take up before the next meeting. Access to surrounding businesses during games. We do have significant business concerns in that area that have trucking. I think we need to address parking on the streets in that area. Right now, I don't think it's signed, and we can't allow people to park on the streets during games or during festivals or events because those folks are running businesses. Some of them are second shift, and that's important to not only the economy, but also just keeping people off of their properties from doing whatever they're doing during these games. It does not in the CUP, as we currently have, talk about tailgating. I think they said in their presentations that they would not allow tailgating, and rightfully so, right? You want people to come in and eat and drink inside, and that's a good idea, but that needs to be in the CUP as an actual condition. Alcohol consumption and what we're gonna do with that. I like drinking as much as the next guy. I love a good IPA, but I think we need to make sure in the CUP conditions that alcohol service stops at a specific time. They do it in Brewers games. It's gotta get stopped at a certain time, and they stop serving. It sounds like they're gonna address the security and traffic concerns, but one of the things, Jason, I think before the next week we need to think about, and this was submitted in the ACE Precision letter on February 14th, 2020, and not all of this stuff is applicable because some of these are dealing with parks actually owned by a community, so those aren't really applicable, but there's a couple in here that are impact plans. A pretty simple 2-3 page impact plans of what happens if we start having to send 15 police officers there, every month. What happens if people are parking on the street? How do we address that? I think creating an additional document to ride along with this proposal or some type of memorandum of understanding would make a lot of sense. And now I go back to the big issue, which is the sound. The way the sound was tested, first of all, the original testing was all done in Summit, and then it was essentially just overlaid into the city of Oconomowoc. All the testing that they did in the spots was just of ambient testing, and then they did algorithms to calculate essentially the sound, what's going to be potentially impacting the folks. I don't think that's good enough. I think we can do better, and we should do better for the people that are around there and living there. And of course, I'm one of those people, and I will be affected by it. In the Tlaski report, and I encourage everyone to go back through, because we're gonna do another meeting, I'm not gonna go back through all of this. But there's significant issues in here. In one part of the report, it says one of the good ways to stop impulsive or intermittent sound is to close your doors and your windows. That's true, but I shouldn't have to do that in summer if it's getting that loud. And I can tell you, there's gonna be a lot of unhappy people in this community if the folks out by me in Briarwood and some of the nearby areas are hearing that impulsive sound. Also, I think it's good for us to delay because the stormwater plan has not yet been approved. The stormwater plan will hopefully address some of the issues with the runoff, with this, what's it called, curb or chopped up rubber? Yeah, the tire rubber. Crumb rubber, never heard of it before. But hopefully in the water plan that's submitted to the Joint Stormwater District, the runoff will be addressed and properly maintained. So that should be done before they come back here. I think that gives you enough, Jason, to kind of look back into some of those conditions to make this, I think, more appropriate. And the hours of operation, I am against changing our amendment, and here's why, or our ordinance on this. We just decided this like 6 months ago, and part of the reason and part of the discussion on that timing is nothing else in our city goes that late. Changing it to 11, I think for inclement weather only would probably be the right way to do it. So we leave it at 10 for the baseball park unless there's inclement weather.
Or extra innings.
Or extra innings, right. And only for the baseball events. And that would help us, I think, on that end
Or
of
any
things.
sporting event.
Right.
Which is what?
Which is what it says partly right now, but it leaves it open for all other events as well. The way it reads right now in the conditional use permits, as amended by the planning commission, allows for other events. Yes, it does. If you
Other
read it,
sporting events.
it's sporting events, but then it says other events till 10 still.
Till 10.
Till 10. What's wrong with 10's fine.
Is what our current ordinance is.
But what I'm saying is this, because of the way the CUP and the conditions are written, it allows them to do those events, which we want them to get permitted.
Well, yeah, yeah.
That's got to get changed. That's my point
Yeah.
there.
You have no problem with 7 AM though, do you?
No, not particularly.
No, because 7 AM, construction starts at 7 AM.
So, I mean, that hits a lot of my high points. I think this is good for us to quick talk about this. I think ultimately, there are a lot of people in favor of it. There are the concerns, and the noise does have to be addressed better. And we need to make sure that the statutes are consistent before we come back to vote on this, and that we have to amend whatever we need to amend.
Dan, is this something that you would work on with Jason?
If I'm invited,
You're invited.
okay.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you for those comments. I do have a concern. I'm a bit confused because I'm asked by one alderman right now to maybe take a stab at redrafting the conditional use permit with conditions that are not ordinances of the city and they're not standards of the CUP. These are policy decisions, and I'm getting direction from one alderman tonight about no parking on the street. Well, we do have street parking. No tailgating. Well, we don't have an ordinance about that. Stopping alcohol consumption at a certain time, we have got laws that talk about that you can drink to a certain time. Impact plans, I don't really quite know, so.
Yeah, but Jason, Jason, I understand that position, but look, when you look at the condition, there's is netting part of our ordinances anywhere?
Well, that was a specific requirement by an outside agency.
Okay. Netting is not part of it, roadway improvement's not part of it, snow removal is not part of it, alcohol license is mentioned in there.
Snow removal
Yeah,
is an
so-
ordinance.
So look, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here
Okay.
already
Yeah.
that are not necessarily an ordinance. And if we're gonna do a conditional use and we're gonna agree to conditions, we're gonna agree to the project, we can add those things in with agreement of the folks here.
Jason, I have a good sense, I think, on the pulse of this
Okay.
council, and you and I can.
Well, I just want the council to hear,
Yeah.
these aren't ordinances that are typical that I didn't miss some or something. These are requests that we heard tonight through the
No,
public
no,
hearing.
I never suggested
Okay.
that you missed it. I just said, I'm suggesting there's ways we can do the project right and make the conditions right.
Right, I'd be
to
happy
do
to
this
add stuff
appropriate,
that
right.
the council directs me to add.
And I do think by doing this and giving us 2 weeks to review it and then having a committee of the whole meeting prior to it to discuss it and fine tune it will be better for the applicant as well, because that gives them good understanding of where we're at and agreement on what we want. So I still think that well, I won't even go into that. Go ahead, Lou.
While we were discussing sound, if I can get you for a second.
Back to sound.
So if you could, understanding acoustics and the impact of the immediate project and the surrounding areas, can you go through your process of how you came up with your heat map basically for the Village of Summit location and how that was overlaid? If you were gonna do that process all over again, specific to the original, or to this site within the city, would that methodology and the process change the results of what you overlaid with those assumptions that are made?
Sure. So let me speak generally about our methodology and then answer your question specifically. So at the originally proposed site location in Summit, when we were brought on to conduct the community noise survey, we identified 2 locations where we did long-term noise monitoring, and by long-term, I mean over a course of several hours. We also selected, I think, 7 or 8 locations where we did spot measurements, 5, 10, 15-minute measurements. We selected those locations by identifying the surrounding residential areas that were likely to receive the greatest impact from the site. And in the course of doing those measurements, in particular the long-term measurements, we determined that I-94 is the dominant noise source at that original site. When this new site was proposed, looked at the geography and noted that I-94 was again in close proximity to the nearest residential locations. So those are identified in our report. They're approximately 4,000 feet to the east, northeast of the site. So we used our measurements from the original survey to establish what the noise impact from I-94 would be at those locations. And so let me clarify that by doing that, we're ignoring any other possible existing noise sources at those locations. So the actual existing noise levels could be higher than what we're estimating. So we're taking a conservative approach and using only the noise impact from I-94. And then we overlay on top of that our predictions of the levels that would be received at those locations from the permanently installed sound system, as we've described with the distributed downward firing loudspeakers. By looking at the levels of noise from that sound system and comparing them to the existing background noise levels, we can establish this predicted impact metric. So that's the scale of generally inaudible, and what we're predicting is occasionally audible, but likely to be minimally disruptive. Does that answer your question?
To a certain extent.
If we were to repeat those efforts for this site, we would go to the two closest residences that have been identified and repeat those measurements. That may establish a higher background noise level than we're assuming. It would be extremely unlikely to be lower.
Right.
Yeah.
There are two types of sound identified as intermittent and impulsive. There's a 10 decibel point differential between those two different types of sound. Is the intermittent impulsive level in the ordinance as it would be required to meet the intermittent or the impulsive? Because the intermittent is a 60 and the impulsive is a 70.
Right. Intermittent and impulsive are terms that are not defined by the ordinance. Ultimately, it would be a legal question as to which of those is applicable. Speaking in broad general terms is commonly used. Impulsive noise is something like fireworks or a starter pistol or something that's instantaneous. Intermittent noise is something that may occur over a period of time, but isn't occurring continuously over that time. So music could reasonably be said to be intermittent, but again, there's no legal guidance to which applies here. In reviewing our predicted levels and comparing them against the noise code, we are finding that the predicted levels will meet that more stringent intermittent noise criteria.
I think that's important for the public and for council to understand, because that is the lower of the two allowable decibel readings that you've identified and feel that will be in compliance with.
Okay. Go ahead.
I get real quick with you. All right, so you're talking about I-94. There's a little thing called the Harley-Davidson dealership out there. What are
So
the
I've heard.
decibels of those Harleys going all summer long? And those things are loud. We're talking about a little bit of stuff at the ballpark. I mean, ouch, I'm just electrocuted. So that's a huge thing. I mean, those Harleys make more noise than anybody talking about on deck, that are number 4. We have to take that in consideration.
Well,
After you, but I just want to talk, what time are you going to start? Yes.
I don't have that, I'm not getting that in the.
Okay, that's fine. That's great timing, because that way we don't have to worry about going over at 10 o'clock. Because I've been to hundreds of these North League games, and if I've seen anything even get over 2 hours and 45 minutes, it's lucky. Because they know how to play ball, they hustle, they don't sit there and play with their gloves too much, and they, no commercials, and they get to the meat of the chase. And then, I'd like to see Tom Steinbach come involved with this watershed thing, because he's our resident expert, you know, take a look at what we're doing out there. And as far as the baseball field doctor, have you done any studies on 5G? Do it, because that's 10 times worse than sitting on that. Okay.
Any other,
And
any
you're on
other
your phone a
relevant,
lot.
any other relevant questions? Go ahead.
That's relevant.
I'm sorry, sir. Sir, I just have a few quick questions for you. On page 2, you talk about ambient noise measured as part of the study, and then you say offer predictions of expected noise levels. So my understanding of how the report is generated is that you didn't actually create the impulsive or intermittent noise at the area where the ballpark would be and then measure that, right? You predicted what the levels were going to be based on a variety of algorithms and conditions and assumptions, correct?
That's correct, and one of those conditions is an agreed upon maximum output level of the sound system. So since it's permanently installed, we have complete control over
Right.
its coverage pattern, its output level, and so forth.
So to me, that would be something else that should likely be included as a condition, and that specifically goes to CUP item 4, which is a maximum output level. The other thing we heard today is that they'd be willing to, you know, if they do get a permit for a concert, that they plug in and that they use that same system, and that should also be a condition of the permit. We also, at the end of your report, you highlighted this general exemptions. Why did you put that in there? Just for fun, or? Just curious.
Those exemptions were highlighted simply to, this is word for word listing of the Conemaugh zoning ordinance as it relates to noise. And we simply highlighted those clauses that may be applicable to this project. We're not recommending, for or against that.
Right, I understand, but you've obviously highlighted that section because if they do those events there, they actually don't even have to comply with the sound ordinance, right?
If that would be part of the permitting process.
Right. So a couple other things on page 12, you talked about if noise barriers were installed and if optimized, you could have an 8 decibel or more reduction. And then you said those matters require further study. So my understanding right now, there are no noise barriers, correct, in the proposal, or that you've at least evaluated?
We have not evaluated any specific noise.
But if noise barriers were to be installed, that could significantly reduce. I mean, 8 decibels is a big deal if you're going from 60 to 52, right?
Potentially, yes.
Um,
Can I clarify one point you made
Sure,
earlier? Would
yeah.
that be all right? Regarding the discussion of residences and specifically doors and windows being inside. So we weren't, by including that or not recommending that as a solution, we're simply providing a comprehensive list of
I
measures
understand.
that may be
Yeah,
feasible.
and that was kind of a cheap shot on my part to say, that shouldn't be expected, right?
You're a lawyer, come on.
Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't expect citizens to have to do that. And that's what we're trying to avoid with this discussion and my attempts to add some additional conditions in here. The other point I wanted to make about our ordinance statute, and different than the actual sound study we received, which is why I think I've got some issues with the sound study in general, is if there's a sound complaint, the process is where the sound is being complained of, you go out and measure it at the property at the noise level that's occurring. The inverse is true with the sound study, which is they just measure the ambient sound and then make assumptions on what it's going to sound like. So there's benefit to that, right? But if somebody starts complaining in my subdivision about the sound, what they're gonna do is actually come out and put a meter at the edge of my property at 5 feet and then test the sound. But then it's kind of too late, right? Which is why it's important for us to get this right tonight or in the next couple weeks if we're gonna go through with this, and making sure it's right so that we don't have to worry 2 years from now, some guy at the edge of my property actually measuring the impulsive or intermittent sound to see if they comply with the ordinance. And putting some of those conditions in will help, I think, that process.
That's what I mentioned earlier, is we get this right the first time, then we don't have to worry about them coming back. Go ahead, Lou.
Staying with this theme of sound.
Thanks a lot, by the way, appreciate it.
Of course.
The algorithm that you use, or the process that you've implemented, does that take into consideration the structure? So like, for example, right now, if you were to take a speaker and broadcast sound, either, and I'll just say intermittent sound, music, at a decibel rating of 80 in the field, that is going to reflect differently than if it's within the stadium, and depending upon the weather conditions, possibly with a wind blowing north to south or south to north. All of those variables that aren't in place right now because the structure doesn't exist can only be really determined based on a hypothetical until that structure does exist, which is why I believe there was testimony that once the stadium would be built and the sound system is implemented, that testing would occur to see what true readings and ratings would be at the points identified, number 1 and number 2, within the study. Is that correct?
Yes, let me kind of take those back to front here. So, as part of typical sound system design, we can, and in this case will, include a device called a limiter, which is part of the electronic signal chain from the sound source, whether it's playback or someone speaking into a microphone. This device sits in between that sound source and the loudspeaker output and monitors the level and says, if you're getting too loud, you can't go any louder. So even if you sit here turning the volume up, that output will be restricted, limited at a certain cutoff. Now, how do we determine what that cutoff is? Once the sound system is actually built and the stadium exists, we, as part of the commissioning process, would go to these sites that we've identified and other key locations with a calibrated sound level meter, and we would put a calibrated input signal into the system, and we'd sit there and measure what the levels are, align those to our predictions and to the other to the limits and conditions that have been imposed upon it, and we would then adjust the limiter to achieve, a tolerable level at those locations. Backing up a little bit further, you're asking about the reflections and the impact of the facility itself. We can and do account for those in our modeling. In this case, there's relatively little impact from the structure itself since it's a pretty open structure. But going back to your point, sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name. But going back to your point earlier about noise barriers, that could be incorporated into the design process if it was determined that there's a need to do so. Right now, our analysis is showing that we can meet the conditions we've shown without that. But if the design were to change or so forth, we can revisit that topic. We do account for reflections off of the surrounding buildings and so forth. So for some more distant residential sites, the existing structures outside of the stadium are providing what we call a barrier effect, limiting sound that travels beyond them. I think that ticks all of your
The Fleet Farm would be a consideration for a barrier, for example, in that determination, and potentially as additional development occurs on that eastern side of a Fleet Farm that doesn't exist right now, that would be another barrier just by the nature of what it provides.
Potentially and likely, yes, but we haven't
Can't
seen those
consider that.
designs,
Correct.
so we couldn't comment.
Right.
People standing hand to hand too
Right,
would be a
and
barrier.
you look at that, you look at Target Distribution Center, you look at Roundy's, it would, all those larger buildings, and part of the whole thing is, you get the stadium built, you do the sound test, things like that, they don't get their occupancy permit till they meet the sound levels that we put in a conditional use permit.
Right, so I think that's a good point. And my understanding on page 20 is that based on your sound study, they reconfigured the sound kind of, and it starts at the bullet points on the top of page 20. No central loudspeaker, multiple loudspeakers, downward angles, use of directional loudspeakers. Those are things that are going to be part of the sound project, essentially?
Correct.
Okay.
And, these are key elements of the strategies, specifically loudspeakers which are relatively close to the listeners, so they don't need to be turned way up to throw 300 feet distant. We're talking more like 75 or 100 feet. And they're angled downward as opposed to pushing sound out horizontally. So, you know, as that sound travels beyond, you know, it basically forms a cone, kind of similar to the LED lights that were being discussed. And that sound then hits the ground and doesn't just keep traveling indefinitely.
Yeah, sound does bounce around though, so does light a little bit, right? But regardless of that, I think this part of your report is good. And I think at least some of these things that you're suggesting, I think should also be part of the conditional use, because that specifically goes to the CUP, which is complying with our noise ordinance, which is an ordinance in the city. So if those things are being proposed or suggested, I would encourage our city staff to include that condition so that, you know, we meet that standard.
I think what we'll have is staff and city attorney go
Okay.
together and. put
Yeah,
that
that
together.
was my last point on the sound
Get
study
that
for now.
information to us prior to our meeting on the 3rd, our committee of the whole meeting, so we can review it and make sure we have it right. Any other comments? So I want to adjourn the meeting till March 3rd.
You should, first you need to decide whether you're going to close the public hearing tonight. And if you are, you can invite more comment tonight on the basis of what you heard. Otherwise, my recommendation is that you allow additional public comment, or the public hearing will remain open to a date and time certain.
I think we should remain it open. I think we should keep it open.
In case we have more questions.
Well, we're gonna,
In case people want to talk about what they've heard now,
I
they
mean-
haven't had a chance to
And-
react.
And this is a big, I mean, this is a big project for the
It
city.
is, yeah.
This is a big
Yes.
change for the area. And I think it's important for us to do it right. And if, you know, we have another hour of people commenting on some of the new changes in the CUP or some of their comments, I mean, what the heck? I mean, that's what we're here to do.
Well, and I think the
My hourly rate keeps dropping for this work based on what we get
the
paid. but-
changes that we make to the CUP be
Exponentially,
presented so
not
that people
standstill.
know what we're talking about too, so.
Right.
Do I make that?
Well, no, I would suggest then that you're
Make a
going to
motion?
hear the rest of the public hearing at a date and time certain, and only after you have finally closed the public hearing do you get into your debate and discussion.
Okay, do I have to give the date?
You have to give a date and time certain.
Date and time certain will be March 3rd, which is our next council meeting, in 2 weeks from tonight,
I move to adjourn the public
What
hearing.
time?
7:30 PM.
Well, you're not gonna have a Cal meeting beforehand,
Why not?
because you're not gonna decide what you're going to do till you hear all of the public comment.
Do we
the point
start
of
an
the public
earlier,
hearing.
do we start an earlier council session then?
You could, instead of having the Cal meeting, have the public hearing at 5:30,
Not 5:30.
6:30.
Yeah, we can do that.
Still
right?
gotta be here till midnight.
What do you want to do, Mayor? What
Let's
time?
have we'll adjourn the public hearing till 6:30 on March 3rd.
I'll move to adjourn the public hearing till 6:30 on March 3rd.
Second.
Who said second? Did you?
I have a quick question before we move on that. The text amendment is different than the CUP. The text amendment is the hours of operation. Is it possible do you feel that you have enough information to move on the text amendment?
No.
So there's some,
Not me.
We combine the public hearings of those two things.
all right.
They were separate.
The answer
They were
is
separate.
yes, I do think we do. Text amendment.
So we could, if we felt comfortable with the text amendment, because the text amendment is a different process than the CUP.
I would
and it's a different-
suggest that we put them both over.
Okay,
Do them all on March 3rd.
all right.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Yes, we have a motion, a second.
Call a roll.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
Staff reports?
Hearing and then look his head, but still agree.
Staff reports? Reports and comments from the mayor, none. Reports and comments from aldermen? None. We have a closed session per Wisconsin stats, 8.85 per N1 per NE. deliberating and negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business. Whenever competitive or bargain reasoning required a closed session, we need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Shaw.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Zwart.
Aye.
Alderman Stray.
Aye.
Alderman Kavieski.
Aye.
Alderman Rogers.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, we're in closed session.